Muy buenos días a todos. Soy Silvia Leal, experta en tecnología y tendencias de futuro, y quiero daros la bienvenida a esta nueva edición del Mastercard Innovation Forum, el evento insignia de la compañía, en el que cada año ponemos encima de la mesa cuáles son esas tendencias y esas tecnologías que van a marcar el sector de los pagos. ¿Y cómo lo hacemos? De la mano de los mejores expertos. Un evento tan importante que para todos aquellos que han leído hoy la prensa, por ejemplo, el caso de 5 días, ya se hacen eco de este evento en el que estamos en este momento, por ejemplo, en el caso de 5 días con una entrevista de Paloma Real. Y este es un evento muy especial para todos porque estamos aquí presencialmente, ¿verdad? Y el año pasado fue un evento digital que tuvimos suerte también, porque ¿qué es lo que había sucedido el año anterior? Que no pudimos celebrarlo. Por eso les doy la bienvenida y quiero saludar también a las personas que nos siguen en streaming desde otros lugares. Dicho lo cual, pasaremos al lema del MIF de este año, que es Together Towards Tomorrow. Y sobre este tema vamos a ir a hablar mucho a lo largo de toda la sesión. Y vamos a hablar, por lo tanto, de transformación digital, de tecnologías incipientes y de cómo a través de su innovación, de la innovación con ellas, vamos a poder avanzar hacia un mundo más sostenible e inclusivo. Y a lo largo de hoy y a lo largo de la agenda, hemos preparado una serie de temas muy importantes porque vamos a hablar, por ejemplo, de la Web 3. ¿Y qué es lo que sucede con la Web 3, los NFTs y el metaverso? Pues quiero dar unas cifras. Bloomberg nos dice que para 2024 generarán 800.000 millones de dólares. McKinsey nos hablan de que en 2030 el metaverso NFTs van a generar la economía actual de Latinoamérica, 5 millones de dólares. ¿Cómo no vamos a prestar atención a la sesión? Pero es que también vamos a abordar temas muy relacionados con ellas, como son ciberseguridad, sostenibilidad, inclusión, diversidad e incluso turismo. Todo ello en una jornada en la que tenemos suerte, porque vamos a contar con los mejores expertos que han venido hasta aquí, personalidades que van a servirnos de inspiración y van a abrirnos los ojos. Y tras estas primeras sesiones haremos un parón. Aproximadamente será sobre las 12 de 15 minutos. ¿Y qué sucederá después? Que tenemos que venir otra vez todos aquí porque la guinda la vamos a tener al final de la jornada. Pero antes seguiremos aquí las sesiones, tras lo que vendrán unas sesiones paralelas o breakout sessions. Descanso, venimos aquí, siguen las sesiones y nos vamos a las paralelas. ¿Pero a qué sesión tengo que ir? Porque tenemos 3. ¿A cuál de todas? Todos hemos hecho una selección. Y esa selección, a la hora de registrarnos, la marcamos y ahora está con un color en nuestra acreditación. Pero ojo, que si no recordamos a qué sesión me inscribí, no hay ningún problema, porque las personas de Mastercard nos van a ayudar a encontrarla. Y, por supuesto, al finalizar, todos nosotros estamos invitados al almuerzo que se va a servir a continuación en el área Priceless. Pero antes de avanzar, tengo que recordar 2 cosas más, 2 recordatorios. Primero, cuando finalicen las sesiones y de comienzo al almuerzo y el networking, podemos y debemos visitar el área de demos en las que os vamos a presentar las novedades tecnológicas más punteras en el sector de los pagos. Y, por supuesto, hay que compartir que estamos aquí en las redes sociales. Hay que compartirlo. Así que quiero recordar que el hashtag es, aunque lo vamos a ver en todos los papeles, #MIF 2022. ¿Ok? A compartirlo en las redes sociales. Así que sin más dilación, vamos a comenzar con una sesión muy interesante que lleva, cómo no, el título de nuestro lema de hoy, Together Towards Tomorrow, y que correrá a cargo de Paloma Real, directora general de Mastercard España, y también Ymir Kriven, presidenta de la División de Europa Occidental de Mastercard. Por favor, un aplauso muy, muy, muy fuerte para ellas.
We are very far. Buenos días a todos, bienvenidos y muchas gracias por acompañarnos hoy en nuestro Mastercard Innovation Forum, el primero que hacemos presencialmente tras la pandemia, y lo que nos hace estar muy emocionados. Estamos encantados de teneros aquí, de reconocer algunas de las caras familiares que durante algún tiempo, pues en muchos casos no hemos visto físicamente después de la pandemia. Y ese reencuentro es precisamente el eje que articula nuestro lema de la sesión de hoy, Together Towards Tomorrow, y que va a ser, como vais a poder observar, un poco el pilar sobre el que vamos a desarrollar todas las ponencias y también la charla con Imer. Antes de dar paso a la charla con Imer, sí me gustaría compartir con vosotros algunas líneas estratégicas que interesan mucho a la compañía y que queremos que conozcáis, y un poco también trasladaros pues el reconocimiento al partnership que tenemos con vosotros, al gran trabajo que hacemos y al acompañamiento en este trabajo que tenemos de impulsar la innovación y trabajar en las nuevas tendencias de mercado que están surgiendo. Como sabéis, toda la parte del ecosistema de medios de pago en España sigue imparable, independientemente de la pandemia. Los datos que seguro que ya conocéis, incluso alguno de vosotros seguro que podría añadir alguno más, pero que dan una idea del potencial de mercado y que creo que son importantes remarcar, son precisamente toda la parte de pues los 88 millones de tarjetas que tenemos, por encima ligeramente superior a otros países que tienen poblaciones superiores, como Italia y Francia. La cuarta posición que ocupamos en el ranking de e-commerce, y luego que somos uno de los países, o el país en Europa Occidental, que más penetración tiene de pago sin contacto, un 86 y creciendo, y especialmente de pago móvil, un 25, porque se sabía mucho de lo que era Europa del Este acerca de la utilización de los pagos digitales y de los pagos sin contacto, pero es bueno recordar de vez en cuando lo bien que nosotros también lo estamos haciendo ahí y la infraestructura tan fuerte que tenemos en pagos. En ese sentido, en cuanto a lo que es la tradición, la tradición de Mastercard, pues los pagos con tarjeta, Mastercard quiere poner el foco fundamentalmente en toda la parte de securización de esas transacciones y también de mejora de la experiencia de usuario y de acompañamiento del usuario en sus diferentes casos de uso que se han visto transformados por toda la parte de la digitalización. En concreto, queremos impulsar toda la parte de tokenización basada en criptografía, y queremos impulsar también el nuevo estándar de pago MV, Click to Pay. Pero sabéis que ya Mastercard no es solamente una compañía de tarjetas o de medios de pago basada en tarjetas, y más allá de eso queremos acompañar a clientes, particulares, empresas en sus necesidades de pago, no importa en qué situación o en qué contexto. Y por eso Mastercard ofrece todo un conjunto de soluciones que tienen que resolver en cualquier contexto, cualquier necesidad de pago, y para ello tenemos una estrategia multirail 360. Algunos de vosotros ya habréis conocido los servicios a los que me refiero, porque trabajáis con nosotros como Mastercard Send para enviar, hacer transferencia de dinero instantáneos, pagos instantáneos. También favorecemos el envío internacional de efectivo a tarjeta en más de 140 mercados con cross-border services. Entramos con fuerza en el mundo cripto, con toda la parte de CyberSource para comprar y vender activos digitales de forma segura, o también trasladando toda la parte de la seguridad con CipherTrace, que lo veréis más adelante en una de las breakout sessions más tarde, y por tanto no me voy a detener en ello, pero sí que queríamos trasladaros que Mastercard, más allá de una compañía de pagos, más allá de una compañía tecnológica, queremos posicionarnos como un facilitador y un catalizador del ecosistema de pagos, de oportunidades de negocio construidas con colaboración y con alianzas entre los diferentes players que estamos hoy reunidos aquí. Y ahí solamente deciros que nos encanta que estéis aquí, nos encanta trabajar con vosotros, siempre bajo el lema Doing Well by Doing Good, que sabéis que es el mantra que articula también la cultura corporativa de Mastercard mundialmente y que hace que pongamos siempre el foco en aquellas tendencias que son un reto actualmente, especialmente en temas de inclusión y sostenibilidad. Y ahí me vais a permitir que haga mención súper breve a 2 proyectos que nos encantan y que luego veréis en uno de los vídeos. Uno de ellos es la plataforma Priceless Planet, que tiene el compromiso de plantar 100 billones de árboles antes de 2025, y uno de los mercados donde se va a hacer es en España, con lo cual ahí yo creo que estamos todos con buenas noticias. Y luego el otro es nuestros premios FRACE, nuestros premios que desarrollamos con la Real Academia de las Ciencias y que reconocen el talento femenino joven, el joven talento científico femenino, con el reconocimiento de 4 mujeres que destacan por su carrera dedicada a las ciencias y la tecnología. En cualquier caso, hoy esperamos que sea un día para hablar de innovación, de cooperación, de oportunidades. Esperamos también que sea un día para vivir momentos que no tienen precio. Por favor, os recomiendo que os quedéis a la comida con nosotros y esperamos que los disfrutéis y que paséis un buen día y que sea de verdad productivo para todos. Y sin más, let me switch to English and to interview Imer Kriven. So, Imer, I would like to start pointing out the enormous transformation that we are suffering, not only in the company, but also as a society. We are really living moments where we have to reinvent what we are doing, and the digital transformation is impacting everything. So, I would like to ask you, what is, for you, head of Mastercard Western Europe, how do you envision this impact in the society and the corporation, and what the theme of today, Together Towards Tomorrow, means to you?
Thanks, Paloma. First of all, good morning, everyone. It's really lovely to be here. It's lovely to be in a room with people and talking together and not sitting on a digital device. So I love this theme, Together Towards Tomorrow, because I think, like many of you, I'm looking forward to tomorrow, because the chaos that we're living through today and that we have been living through in these last few years, I'm really ready to move past that. So when we think about it, you know, we've lived through a health crisis, a global health crisis, which disrupted everything, our economies, our societies, our supply chains. We started this year with some optimism, which unfortunately in February vanished when we had the situation with Ukraine here in Europe. And that's led not only to some disaster and really horrendous environments for the people in Ukraine and indeed Russia and the countries around it, but now we're feeling the impact of that with the energy crisis in Europe, with soaring inflation, and what that is going to mean. And you know, and of course, we also have, you know, as you mentioned, Paloma, the environment and the climate crisis that we're living through. So this confluence of all of these challenges, all of these crises that we're dealing with. So certainly I'm looking forward to moving past that. What it means for us, you know, we've seen some trends coming out that affect all businesses, not just particularly the payments business. But definitely I would say that there are 4 key trends that we're looking towards. The first, of course, is technology. All new innovation is driven by the technology, and when we think about the power that 5G or that AI or that quantum computing, we've only just started to really explore these areas and what the opportunities will be that comes from them. I think the second big theme, and we've all experienced it, is how commerce is changing, how you purchase, how you buy, how that has changed from the physical in-store environment to being a clash of both physical and digital, and how that will continue to evolve as we move into the future. I think the third big area for us is really around the business models of the future, because we saw this huge influx of new players into the space, and certainly in financial services, we saw that with this huge growth of the fintech players who have disrupted everything. They've disrupted how we create revenue, the distribution channels. So that business model is going to be evolving as we look to open banking and as we look to, you know, new ways to create revenue sources of the future. And of course, the fourth area, the fourth big trend, Europe has been described as being the world's leading exporter of regulation, and that is definitely true. We We create a lot of regulation here. It's been largely focused on the world of financial services, but that will evolve to other parts of the economy. And so those trends are just making us rethink a lot of things. But how we interact with our customers is one of the most important things, the interface that we use. I think we expect in the next 5 years that over 70% of e-commerce volume will be pushed through 5 platforms. 70%, that's a very big number. So how we interact with our customers is going to evolve. The business model that we used, I already mentioned, that's going to evolve, but what does decentralized finance mean for how we create revenue and profitability in the future? And of course, payments they're going to change. They are changing. They have changed rapidly. We saw, contactless, you mentioned 80-something% of contactless now, of all transactions are contactless. It's not a new technology, but the scale of it has become really huge. And we're going to continue to evolve that in the future. So it's very exciting to look to tomorrow.
So since today is all about innovation, all about new trends, could you tell us a little bit more about what are the new products, new solutions and innovations that we are currently working on?
Yeah, so I think many of you know Mastercard very well, and you know that we look to innovation around some key pillars, whether that's the payment experience in and of itself, whether it's the services that sit around that payment experience, or looking towards new networks, whether it's the open banking network, the identification network, and all of those things. When I'm thinking about it practically for my markets in Western Europe, we're leaning into 3 key areas, I would say. The first, no surprises, how we're supporting and accelerating the digital transformation. So we have the technology of tokenization. We know it brings a better user experience forward. All of the innovation that sits around that, whether it's the controls, the lifecycle management. We have fantastic authentication innovations. We know consumers are happy to use their biometrics to authenticate. So bringing those 2 together to create a very seamless experience in digital, and one that's safe and secure, easy to engage with, I think that's really important for us. And Paloma, you've already mentioned Click to Pay. That's the guest checkout experience. We're live here in Spain. It's the first market in my division that we've gone live with. It's incredibly exciting, just really, really transforming that experience, which today we all know isn't where it needs to be. So digital acceleration, one key area for me. Second key area is how we're supporting businesses. Small businesses in particular are really going to be hit with inflation and with the challenges that they've had to live through in these last few years. How do we support them more? How do we help to accelerate their digitization? Whether it's making every phone device to be an acceptance device, just think about how easy, how financially, how it's inexpensive for businesses to actually be able to accept now. So supporting small businesses, supporting them with open banking, because open banking is going to transform how we can offer, what we can offer to businesses, whether it's financial management, whether it's making, supporting decisions around the ease that they can get working capital or whatever lending needs. And we also support small and large businesses with new platforms such as our Track. We call it BPS, Business Payment Services Platform. And this just connects large global buyers and sellers and allows them to flex between different rails, whether it's card rails or account rails. It supports them so that they can choose to use these rails however suits them. If they want the working capital of a credit line on a card, they can have that. Or if they want the flexibility of the account rails, they can have that, with more data being available to them to support their invoicing and reconciliation needs. So supporting businesses big and small, the backbone of Europe, I think it's really important. And the third area, and this is, personally I'm very committed to this area, because I don't want the climate crisis, and I don't want the environment to be, a collateral damage of the situation that we have in Europe right now with the war and with inflation. We need to focus on that. So bringing forward solutions that will help consumers to understand the purchasing habits that they make. We have Carbon Calculator. It allows people to see exactly what they're purchasing and what the carbon footprint of that will be. So educating everybody to be more aware of the impact of their purchasing choices. And if they do choose to have a high CO2 transaction, how can they offset that? So working with the Priceless Planet Coalition so that consumers could in fact donate to plant a tree. We all know the safest way to save our planet is to ensure that we reforest in the right way. So they are the three areas: digital acceleration, supporting businesses, SMEs, and really driving home the sustainability approach.
And super fast, last question. So talking about innovation, but a specific innovation that we can apply in a business segment that is key for Spain, as is tourism, due to our dependency of tourism as a market, but also is very important for Mastercard Spain, for the office, because we have the Tourism Innovation Hub based here, the Global Innovation Hub. Very fast. What are your recommendations, considering that you are managing the region that probably has more impact with tourism? What would be your advice about how to innovate and extract more value from the tourism sector?
So tourism is back. Natalia from our Economics Institute is going to be up on stage later, and I'm sure she's going to tell you that we see now both personal travel and business travel back to the levels that they were before the pandemic. And us Europeans, we love to travel, and it's become a really sacred part of our, of our lives, and we want to protect that. So we are protecting our ability to travel, and we're still engaging in it. So that's really important. But recovering from the crisis in a way that's sustainable and accessible to all, I think that's really important. I love the fact that we've opened up a hub here around tourism and around working with governments and new partners on this. We've done this in other markets in Europe. We have an innovation hub in Ireland. We have our sustainability hub in the Nordics. We find when you create these hubs, you really get exponential focus and innovation coming out of it. So that's what we're going to do here. And I think we have such a huge opportunity. We have our data, the insights that it will bring forward, supporting digitization, making sure that we can support businesses to have access to and to be able to offer and encourage tourists into their shop environment, both online and physically, and just working with new partners, working with different partners, I think will create just an environment for us to think differently about this. So really exciting. It's based here in Madrid. It will be run by Paloma and the team here, but it's available for all of our markets. But look, you guys are leading the charge on this one, so it's very exciting.
Okay, so I think that it is time to move. Thank you very much for visiting us, for sharing the day with us, and for sharing your thoughts and your views about these specific topics that are so relevant for the audience and for the industry. So thank you.
Have a wonderful day. Enjoy it, and I'll speak to you all soon.
Yeah. Thank you.
Pues llega así el turno del primer ponente del día, Salim Ismail, autor del bestseller Exponential Organizations y fundador de Singularity University, OpenExo y Exo Works, que ha venido a nuestro Innovation Forum a hablarnos del futuro de las empresas, de transformación y de disrupción en las organizaciones. Y nos va a explicar cómo hacerlo con éxito y, sobre todo, cómo crecer más rápido que nuestros competidores. Así que please join me on welcoming to the stage Salim Ismail.
Buenos días. I'm going to be speaking in English, so I apologize for that. Your English is much better than my Spanish will ever be. I want to give you three kind of things to think about this morning. The first is, why are we seeing so much volatility and disruption in the world today? Secondly, what are the broader implications, both for business, but also for society? And third, and most importantly, what can you do about it? How do you adapt to this new world that we're living in? We're living today in this kind of post-pandemic world. We think of the pandemic as a singularity, right? Every model by which we predicted the future has basically broken. I'm going to just try and get my slides back here. Our favorite joke is that AI is very easy, but AV is very hard. So you can use that in thing. So when we look at things like the pandemic, we're seeing a global black swan event, and we expect to see quite a lot more of these as we move forward. A little bit about my background, you heard some of it. I'm actually from India, originally schooling in university in Canada, 10 years here in Europe, and the last 20 years in the US. Most notably, I was the head of innovation at Yahoo, running their incubator. And I learned a fundamental lesson that when you try anything disruptive in a large organization, the immune system attacks you. Right? Because all of our organizations are built to resist change and withstand risk. And how do you deal with that, and how do you juxtapose with that is almost all of the work that we've been doing since then. Because if you can't navigate disruptive innovation as a large organization today, you won't survive. We have to learn how to juxtapose with this. So let me get, and I wrote this book, as was mentioned. We now have a global community of 18,000 consultants, entrepreneurs, innovators, technologists operating around this paradigm. And basically the book was about, we've learned how to scale technology very well. How do you scale the actual organization, right? Because the way we build organizations is very 20th century, even 19th century, and totally the world is operating on a different paradigm. And it really starts with this graph. Ray Kurzweil put this graph together. He's one of the leading thinkers in the world, has been tracking disruptive technologies for 40 years now. And he looked at Moore's law, and he went all the way back to 1900 and found that we have been doubling computational price performance for over 100 years, way before Gordon Moore made his predictions. The question that he asked when he saw this data is, why is this curve so smooth and so predictable? We've had wars and recessions and ups and downs in the industry. You should expect a very jagged stock market shape. Yet you see this very steady, predictable progression. It doesn't make sense. And he spent 10 years researching this, trying to understand why this was happening, and came up with a very fundamental observation, which is now driving all of our lives, which is once you take any domain, a discipline, industry area, product area, technology, and you power it with information technologies, and it acquires informational flow properties, the price performance starts doubling. Most importantly, once that doubling pattern starts, it doesn't stop, it just keeps going. And cognitively, we have a very difficult time seeing this because it can't keep going infinitely, it has to level off. And the secret is, if you can see the different bands, in computation, we've had multiple technologies like vacuum tubes, relays, transistors, now integrated circuits. You can think of each one of those technologies as an S-curve. A technology takes off, accelerates, reaches its upper limits. But if you have an information-based environment, something else always takes over the curve. And we're now actually reaching the end of the life cycle of integrated circuits. The chips are getting very hot down at surface level. We're down to a few nanometers wire thickness. But now we have a bunch of technologies clustering at the edge of that final curve, which is 3D chip design, optical computing. Probably quantum computing is the most likely candidate, but that requires a lot of alcohol to discuss, so I won't get into it here. This actually led Peter Diamandis, who's the main founder of Singularity University, to write a book called Abundance, charting out that if we can harness this acceleration, we'll soon have an abundance of healthcare, education, clean water, energy in about a decade. And what does that world look like? And fundamentally, a basic property and characteristic of technology, it takes something that is scarce and it makes it abundant. Right? And this is an enormous challenge for all of our legacy environments, because for 10,000 years, every business in the world is focused on scarcity. If you didn't have scarcity, you pretty much didn't have a business. And yet we're moving now towards an abundance of space, time, distance, money, et cetera, et cetera. How do we deal with that? So that's the foundational thinking here. Peter runs the Express Foundation, where I'm on the board. Every board meeting starts with, what did Elon just do? And then we move on to the rest of the business of the day. You may have seen the $100 million Carbon X Prize, which we announced with Elon a few months ago, the largest public prize ever offered because of the need to figure out how to extract carbon out of the atmosphere at scale. The challenge that we have with exponential growth is that, as I said before, it's very hard to see it. All of our education, training, intuition about the world teaches us linear extrapolation. Right? And yet the world is operating on a completely different heuristic. We saw the world leaders that dealt very well with this and understood that the pandemic was a doubling problem and the ones that didn't. Now, from a technology perspective, what's incredibly exciting and completely unique is that we now have a dozen technologies operating on this doubling pattern. And this is unique in human history. In our past, at any time in our history, maybe one technology is accelerating or another. We've never seen this many move this quickly all at the same time. In neuroscience, the resolution at which we can image the brain is doubling every year. Right? We're doubling the speed of how fast we can sequence the human genome every 6 months. That may be the fastest moving technology we've ever seen. You look at the pace of development in blockchain and cryptocurrencies, unbelievable. And this leads to kind of 4 major paradigms that are occurring because you take all these breakthroughs. Each technology is doubling on its own. Where it intersects, it adds a whole other application area and a whole bunch of other possibilities come out. You take cryptography that is doubling in its own way, computation doubling its own way, you cross them and boom, we have the entire crypto world. Let me cover each of these briefly. The first one is obvious, we're digitizing the world very rapidly. It turns out when you digitize, things become very disruptive. And the best analogy and framing we found for this disruption is photography. Right? Now, many of you aren't old enough to remember film photography. You're operating on a physical image, chemical image on a film. You're operating from a scarcity model. Right? You can only carry so much film, costs about €1 a photograph, etc. And you operate on this scarcity basis. When you move to digital photography and you move to the information-based environment, 3 fundamentally important things happen. Right? Marginal cost goes to 0, and that's why software is eating the world. The second thing that happens as a result of the cost disappearing is the domain completely explodes. In film photography, we're very carefully clicking here or clicking there. We're basically holding the button down on all of our devices and taking literally billions of times more photographs because the cost is gone. The third thing that happens is very subtle, but very important, especially from a business perspective, is you change the problem space. Right? What I mean by that is when you had scarcity-based photography and a physical material environment, you had a bunch of business models cropping up around that scarcity. I might sell very expensive photographs. I might offer courses on photography. I might publish books on composition. You move to the digital photography abundance environment, and the problem that we now have is we have 8 copies of our photographs on 6 different online services, and you can't find anything. You've gone from a sourcing problem to a filtering problem. And this paradigm is occurring in industry after industry, domain after domain, product area after product area, and you're seeing much of that in your world. And the reason is once you have an information-based environment, you can apply all sorts of interesting things to it to optimize it, understand it better, modeling, correlation, etc. When we apply this to industries, we tend to think of things in 3 layers. The vast majority of our history is physical products, right? And all of our business model, value creation, revenue generation came from the physicality of the world. We assemble raw materials, we extract raw resources, we move things around, and all of the revenue creation, value creation comes from that bottom layer. Then we added products like the Kindle or iPhone where the product is physical, but all the revenue is digitally driven. And that's kind of interesting. But now with the rise of mobile, internet, et cetera, we have entire industries that are completely digital with no physical manifestation at all. The news business, music, books, et cetera, et cetera. And we're seeing the world flip around. Industry after industry is moving up that stack. I write in the book that the Tesla is not really a car with computers and sensors in it. It's a computer with wheels. And you look at it very differently from that perspective. That's why car companies can't create that Tesla. It's not a car. In fact, one of my alumni corrected me and said, "You're wrong about that. Remember that Tesla updates itself every few weeks. You have to think of it as an app that has wheels," right? Which is ridiculous at one level, but directionally very accurate. So with all this going on, let me give you the implication on a couple of broad sectors as we see the impact of all of these. Vertical farming. We have been doing horizontal farming for most of our 10,000 civilization year history. We're moving now to vertical farming. We're drip feeding the water to the plants. We know exactly what nutrients the plant needs. It's just crossing over into economic viability. The best calculation we've seen is if you took Manhattan and took 35 skyscrapers in Manhattan and turned them into vertical farms, that will feed the entire city sustainably. Right? That's a massive shift from the way we do things today, and this is now very possible and will only accelerate into the future. Right? I think of most foods today, a McDonald's burger is kind of 3D printed already, right? It's kind of that we're almost there. This is our old way of doing vertical farming. This is obviously very difficult, and we should avoid this if at all possible. The biggest disruption that we're seeing, and certainly the biggest disruption we'll see in our lifetimes, is the rise of solar energy, which is doubling every 22 months in its capability. And it's been doing this for 40 years. So for 40 years, roughly every 2 years, we double the price performance of solar energy. At this pace, we will be able to deliver all of our energy needs globally with solar in 6 years. We're 3 doublings away. So by 2030, we'll be able to, not that we will, but we'll be able to. That completely changes global geopolitics, right? The Middle East basically collapses. I'm Canadian, 40% of exports. The basis of the Canadian economy disappears. The US has to find other reasons to go to war. All sorts of things happen. The reason Russia is invading Ukraine now is they won't have any currency to do it in a few years. So that's why this is happening now and not in 5 years or 7 years. And we've seen the unbelievable, look at the comparison in price over different fossil fuels and the change over a few years. The cost of solar systems has dropped 150 times. You won't see this in the news. Right? It's unnoticeable. It just keeps dropping and dropping and dropping. Most of the farms in California are now solar powered. Chile, in South America, they're generating so much solar energy in Chile, or they're giving it to their neighboring countries for free. That's happening right now. And think of the economic implications for businesses and homes if energy is free. How do you interact with that world, right? My favorite example of this is the Kentucky Coal Museum is now using solar panels, right? How do you look in the mirror if you're in that industry? It turns out when you have these broad transformations, you see these weird things that make no sense, and it's an indication that there's a broader thing at play. So there's technology disruption and industry disruption coming, but the biggest challenge I think we have globally is our ability to adapt to this. E.O. Wilson, the famous biologist, nailed this. He said, you know, our emotions are Paleolithic, our institutions are medieval, and we have godlike technology. And the work we have to do as leaders is reconcile those 3 layers. Right? When we look around the world, every institution by which we run the world is basically breaking in front of us in the face of this. The one way I frame it is with all of these technologies, we had the printing press in the 15th century. We call it now a Gutenberg moment because it completely changed the world. I say today that we have about 20 of those hitting us at the same time. Because just solar energy changes the world completely. Blockchain changes the world. AI, autonomous cars, drones, CRISPR, biotech. We have about 20 major innovation breakthroughs. Each one completely changes the world. And we literally can't spot any institution that survives this. They're all designed for a world that didn't change very much. Right? Education systems are designed to take a young child, train them through their early 20s to be ready for the existing job market. Well, we have no idea what a job looks like in 5 years. What are we teaching them? My favorite example of an institution under stress is marriage. It turns out we invented marriage as a social institution about 9,000 years ago. And when that first emerged as a social structure, 9,000 years ago, average lifespan was about 23 years old. So you got married and you had kids and you died. Marriage is not supposed to last 50, 60 years, right? My wife calls it state-sanctioned torture. And as we evolved, we were about to double human lifespan in the next 20 years or so. How are we going to adapt that institution to deal with this, right? What does the constructs of that look like? And that applies across the board to every institution that we can see. From an economic perspective, this is having enormous implications because, as I said, the cost is dropping. Here's the cost of light over a period of time, or the cost of DNA sequencing. And you can see the incredible crash. I showed you this graph. In technology after technology, the price is crashing. This is, again, a second very unique thing. First, we have all these technologies moving at light speed. Secondly, for the first time in human history, advanced technologies are dropping in price. Throughout human history, advanced technologies cost a lot, and only a big company or government lab could do R&D, launch new products and services. Today, for the first time in human history, advanced technologies are very cheap. Solar energy is cheap, sensors are cheap, the blockchain is open source and free. And this completely changes the game as to what's possible. When we were doing space shuttle launches, it cost about $600 million per launch. That was the basic price of it. SpaceX dropped that by 10x, brought it down to 60 million. This is relativity space. They're 3D printing the rocket engines. They're going to be doing it for $6 million. So that's 100 times change in about 20 years, right? Unbelievable. What does that make available when you have 100 times drop in the cost of a particular domain? We've also seen that when you digitize a domain, you see this incredible deflationary cliff where the revenues just suddenly stop. There was a 6x drop in revenues in the newspaper business once we digitized it. The music business, 10x drop in revenues. And we're seeing this enormous demonetization take place. I urge you to read this book called The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth. I think of him as the chief economist of the abundance age. He gave me a really profound comment. He said, Bitcoin gives you money velocity without debt. The reason we have debt-based monetary systems is you can create money velocity and move things quickly, and businesses have credit that they can invest in, and Bitcoin breaks that. In fact, our monetary systems based on a debt-based environment don't work if technology is deflationary. Right? So this is a structural issue that we're dealing with. The challenge we have is we don't see this, as I said. And I have 100 examples, but I just want to show you one to highlight this. What you see in the black here is the actual growth of solar energy over a 15-year period, right? Total hockey stick, exponential growth, etc. The colored lines represent the predictions from the top energy experts in the world as to the future of solar. And what you see is at every single point on this exponential curve, the experts go linear, right? It doubles and they go, no, it's got to level off. It doubles again, they go, no, it's going to go linear now. In 2018, they predict it goes down. When the cost is dropping 50% a year, how do you predict that it goes down, right? This is not a math issue, this is a cognitive issue. We saw the same thing with the prediction of mobile phones or global bandwidth, or for years, every time you turn around, the email is going to crash, the internet's going to crash. Everything looks like it's about to stop and stall, and yet it never happens. It just keeps going. And this is the cognitive issue because governments use these predictions to make strategic, and big companies use these predictions to make strategic forecasts, and they're completely wrong. And I could give you 100 examples. I just want to get that thought into your head that many of the experts in our companies operate in this basis. For years, the entire car industry said that Tesla was never going to work, right? Years. And we believed them. And they were completely wrong. And so this is the paradigm we have to overcome internally. Because the thing that, as I mentioned before, is the cost drops. All technology is going through this type of a domain and this type of a transition where the domain becomes digital, you get open source communities forming, and then you get radical disruption of the status quo. Many of you have seen the Hyperloop. Elon wants to go from LA to San Francisco in 20 minutes at about 6,000 kilometers an hour. To give you a sense of the mindset here, I was chatting with him and I said, Elon, I have a degree in theoretical physics. If you accelerate a human being from 0 to 6,000 kilometers an hour and then decelerate them back to 0 in 20 minutes, you're probably going to kill them. And his response was, yeah, it's an issue, right? It's an issue. For me, in this case, I'm the expert, right? I'm going, whoa, hold on a second. You become very French and you go, no, pas possible. And let's just stop everything. He's just like, yeah, this is a speed bump we have to overcome. He is now training tens of thousands of entrepreneurs to just keep going when they hit a roadblock. Just keep going. And this is now exploding the innovation space globally. And to show you this is not just a Silicon Valley thing, this is a fishing village in Vietnam where once a month a big ship carrying diesel fuel used to come to deliver diesel fuel for their boats. At some point, the ship stopped coming, so they have no fuel for their fishing boats. There's no way they can do their fishing. So they literally buy a solar panel, connect it to the propeller. They look up on the internet how to do this, and they literally have invented a solar-powered boat. So here you have cutting-edge innovation using disruptive technologies happening at the edge of the world. This is very exciting, right? And there's no stopping this type of a paradigm. This is the Vega. It's the third fastest electric supercar in the world, 900 horsepower. This is being designed, engineered, and built in Sri Lanka, okay, that hotbed of automotive innovation. Sri Lanka is an island of fishermen and farmers, right? The fact that you can do this there, I love showing this to German car companies. They just literally, their brains break in terms of how is this even possible, right? And yet here we see it. Vitalik Buterin, 18 years old, ignores his professors, gets a group of friends, and boom, we have Ethereum. That was just never possible in the world before. So how do you adapt to this and how do you deal with this? Let me move to that part of this. This is the quote that's been stuck in my head now for 10 years. David Rose is one of the godfathers of angel investing, and he makes the point that all of our organizations are built for efficiency and for predictability. But today you need to be architected for agility, flexibility, adaptability, speed. Right? And our old org structures don't fit this. And we basically wrote this book tagging the characteristics of fast-growing organizations. We looked at the 200 fastest-growing unicorns and said, how are they doing it? And we basically came up with a definition that you have new organizations delivering 10 times better, faster, cheaper than their peers in the same space. A great example of this is TED, which used to be just a nice conference, 1,500 people a year going to a conference in Monterey. Chris Anderson takes it over. He does three things. He establishes a huge purpose, ideas worth spreading. Right? Then he puts all the TED Talks on YouTube, leveraging rich media. Then he allows anybody to go create a TEDx event. And boom, in a decade and a half, he has a global media brand at a cost of zero. So you can take an established environment, blow it open to a global level at near zero cost. So you think, okay, that works in that domain, but there's some traditional industries that may not work. This is a used car company out of China called Guazi. They sell used cars. Now, if you think, how do I disrupt used cars? It's not that obvious. Maybe you have an app, maybe you have a better warranty or something. What these guys do is they show up at a car, they take 250 data points, audio of the engine, which then gets fed through a machine learning algorithm. They can listen to the engine and detect how good is the engine by the perturbation and the noise. The engine then comes up with a real-time price of that car. They say to the seller, here's the value of your car. We will buy it from you for 10% less in cash right now. And then they go to somebody that wants to buy the car and say, we'll sell it to you. There's the price of the car. We'll sell it to you for 10% more. They're 7 years old. They've captured 80% of the used car market in China. Okay? 7 years, 80% market share. Unbelievable. Right? And this is the possibility if you can organize for this new world. So how do you do this? So there's three kind of pieces that we've had. The most important, as I mentioned, was what we call this purpose-driven organization. Paul Pullman read the book a few years ago from Unilever, ordered every brand in Unilever to become MTP-driven, and now we have the 5 most profitable brands in Unilever are the ones that adopted it the most. And so this becomes the North Star, answers the Simon Sinek question as to why do you exist. Then we have 5 externalities that allow you to scale very quickly. Uber doesn't hire its own staff. Airbnb is leveraging other people's assets. We found a way of taking the data assets of any company and multiplying the market value of the company by 5 times just by doing something interesting with the data assets. So those are a bunch of externalities. And then there's a bunch of 5 internal mechanisms like lean startup thinking, decentralized organizations leading to DAOs, real-time dashboards, etc. We kind of frame it in the image of a brain. You have a bunch of capabilities for growth and a bunch of capabilities on the left side for control and managing control and driving culture. This is GitHub, the highest rated EXO we ever saw. This company got bought by Microsoft for $7.5 billion. And I remember talking to the accounting partner who was managing this acquisition, and he was going crazy. He was like, they have no assets, pretty much. They have basically no workforce. They have no intellectual property. There's nothing I can put on the balance sheet. Right? I have nothing to put there. He literally was trying to kill the transaction because there's nothing, he's no way how to value it. How are we paying $7.5 billion for this thing that there's nothing there, right? And Satya Nadella finally said, just buy it. They have a community of 30 million developers. We want that. Most NFT projects that you see are really structured in this EXO. They're very purpose-driven. They're they've built a community. Think of all the blockchains that have created unbelievable value. They've taken a community and added crypto economics. That's it, right? That's my Bored Ape, by the way. And so it's mandatory today to have one of these in some weird way. So does the model apply to big companies? When we looked at big companies, when we launched the book a few years ago, we ranked the Fortune 100 by the flexibility, adaptability of their organization. How scalable, adaptable is IBM using lean startup thinking? Is Walmart decentralizing their decision-making or not? And I did a segment on TV in the US presenting this index. We then tracked over 7 years which were the 10 that use these characteristics the most and which use them the least. Okay? And then we compared the results. So the top 10 most flexible, agile organizations in the Fortune 100 outperformed the bottom 10 least flexible, least agile by a ton on revenue growth, profitability, return on assets. But the bottom row, shareholder returns, the top 10 outperformed the bottom 10 by 40 times over 7 years. Okay? This is unbelievable. Why? Because as the external world becomes more volatile, your ability to adapt will drive market value. Right? And so that's the basic paradigm. You have to be today driven by that agility. If you have the best strategy in the world and a pandemic hits, it doesn't matter, you're done. And we're going to have increasing shock this way. So when we advise large organizations, we basically give them two major thoughts. One, update your leadership that we are in a new world. Right? Secondly, do not do disruptive innovation inside the core organization. Do it at the edge. Okay? Larry Page came to me a few years ago and said, hey, your unit at Yahoo is successful. Should I do that at Google? And I said, no, you'll have this immune system response, but do something like it, and you see the result as Google X, where they take new technologies to the edge of the company. The master of this capability is Apple. And yes, Apple has a great design capability and a great technology supply chain. I argue that their real innovation is organizational. Because what they do, unlike anybody else in the world, is they will form a small team that's very disruptive. They will take that team to the edge of the organization. They'll keep them completely secret and stealth, and they'll say to them, go disrupt another industry. Right? So they have a portfolio of teams looking at different industries, watches, cars, payments, whatever, and when they're ready to go into it, that's their model. There's no limit to their market cap. When they hit $1 trillion, I was the first person to say they'll hit $2 trillion, and they'll just keep going like that. So the way you do this is you reshape your organization to spin these things off the edge, and ideally that becomes the new gravity center of the company. We actually have a precedent for this. Lojas Americanas is the largest retailer in Brazil, spun off an Amazon-style e-commerce unit, had the discipline to leave it alone at the edge, and boom, it's now generating more value than the core organization. Right? I'll give you the example of Marriott Hotels as a negative, which is Marriott's worth about $50 billion today. If Marriott had spun off Airbnb, Booking.com, TripAdvisor, they'd be worth 5 times as much. And the reason I use this example is all of those ideas were sitting inside Marriott, but the immune system would not let them out. So for fear of cannibalizing the existing business, they were leaving this much on the table, right? So this is what you need to do, is unlock some of that value internally. These are the responses by what I mean by an immune system, right? And many of you see this. You try and do anything crazy in a legacy organization, you get these answers, these questions. No, can't do it, timing's not right, maybe until next quarter, et cetera, et cetera. We have to, as a global business community, solve this problem. We've actually created a 10-week sprint that hacks culture and scale in large organizations, piloted this with Procter & Gamble, and we found a way of moving leadership, culture, management thinking 3 years ahead in 10 weeks. We've open sourced this so that anybody can run this on their own organizations. We've now done it a bunch of times. Let me leave you with one last example of how radically the world is changing. We ran an XPRIZE a few years ago called the Water Abundance XPRIZE. And the idea was, can you create a machine that will filter water molecules out of the atmosphere like a reverse air conditioner? 2,000 liters a day, which is enough for a village or an apartment building, using only renewable energy at a cost of less than 2 cents a liter. That was the hard part. Commercial systems today are about 50, 75 cents a liter. 2 cents a liter is really difficult. 2 years in, a team pops up, says we've done it, we ran the test, and we awarded the prize. We now have a machine that can extract clean water anywhere in the world, and there are 1 million villages up on hillsides in Indonesia, Asia, Africa, South America that now can navigate the water problem. And so this is how fundamentally and amazingly the world is changing. The question is, how can you adapt? So I urge you to think about your business systems, payment systems, your ecosystems in operating in this new type of a way. Right? So I hope I've given you some thought. We have time for like 1 or 2 quick questions if you have any, but I'll be around for the next few hours and maybe through lunch if you have specific questions. But first of all, thank you for having me. And any questions? I covered a huge number of areas there. So any questions? Everybody's totally freaked out by the thing. Nobody? You're Spanish, because I know you're not shy. I know that you're kind of pretty crazy. So nobody? All right, well, thank you very much. Have a great day, and grab me if you need me. Thank you.
It's beautiful. It's majestic. It's literally the most priceless thing there is. Protecting what's priceless is a job that belongs to each and every one of us. At Mastercard, we're tackling the challenge of climate change head-on and creating opportunities for our 3 billion cardholders to make a difference now. We've committed to net zero emissions. We're investing in the Sustainability Innovation Lab to develop the climate change solutions of tomorrow, educating people about their carbon footprint to promote sustainable spending with our carbon calculator, building donation solutions that make it easier for everyone to contribute, and working with partners to offer sustainable card materials with less waste. We're mobilizing the power and reach of our global network to unite companies, communities, and consumers around climate action to help build a prosperous and inclusive future for people and the planet. We'll continue to do our part, but we need partners with big ideas to take meaningful action, like joining the Priceless Planet Coalition.
The Priceless Planet Coalition, it's a beautiful idea around collaboration.
Collaboration allows us to accelerate our impact.
Sustainability is an increasingly important thing. It's imperative that we look to explore what solutions are out there today.
We're right at the start of our journey and we're really excited about it.
A growing number of partners working side by side with experts to restore 100 million trees in the places where reforestation matters most. Because nothing is more priceless than this planet we call home.
Por favor, les rogamos que vayan accediendo a la sala principal. El evento va a continuar. Gracias.
Please go to the main room. The event is about to start again. Thank you.
Por favor, les rogamos que vayan accediendo a la sala principal. El evento va a continuar. Gracias.
Please go to the main room. The event is about to start again. Thank you.
He ganado el premio al Joven Talento Femenino de la Fundación de la Real Academia de las Ciencias de España y Mastercard, en la categoría de Física y Química. Mi trabajo se centra en el estudio de las propiedades cuánticas de la materia a escala muy pequeña, a escala nanométrica.
Soy doctora en física y fui galardonada en la categoría de transferencia de la ciencia a la tecnología. Mi trabajo se centra en el desarrollo, investigación e implementación de bloques detectores PET de alta eficiencia y es una técnica de imagen médica que se utiliza especialmente en medicina nuclear.
He recibido el premio al Joven Talento Científico Femenino por la categoría de Matemáticas y Ciencias Afines. Mi investigación trata sobre el desarrollo de metodología estadística. Concretamente, el Banco Mundial está usando los métodos que he desarrollado para la estimación de la pobreza y la desigualdad a nivel regional en el mundo.
Y he recibido el premio en la categoría de Biología y Geología. Yo trabajo estudiando la calidad del aire que respiramos. Si hay una parte que viene del tráfico, hay una parte que son emisiones naturales de los árboles, de manera que si sabes de dónde viene, pues puedes saber qué puedes hacer para mejorarlo. Ganar este premio ha supuesto una inyección de motivación y saber que el trabajo que uno ha hecho durante mucho tiempo parece que sí sirve de algo y tiene un reconocimiento.
Ha sido un reconocimiento muy importante a todos los años que llevo de esfuerzo continuado.
Y esto nos permite reconocer a nivel nacional lo que hacemos y realmente nos demuestra la utilidad.
Me ha provocado un sentimiento esperanzador porque pienso que se está reconociendo el trabajo impresionante que hacen las mujeres y pienso que hoy en día ser científica puede ser un poquito más fácil para el resto de las mujeres.
Hay una evolución muy positiva de la integración de la mujer en la ciencia en general y esto lo demuestran pues que cada vez nos llegan más estudiantes de máster, más estudiantes en prácticas y creo que esto lo hemos conseguido gracias a cada vez darle más visibilidad a las mujeres que estamos en el grupo. No nos da miedo hablar, entonces vamos a conferencias, vamos a proyectos, intentamos motivar a las jóvenes para que se unan.
Es un muy buen momento para seguir esta carrera porque creo que ahora hay una potenciación de la mujer para que trate de hacer la mejor carrera que pueda hacer. Y estos premios de la Real Academia de las Ciencias es un ejemplo de ello.
A cualquier mujer que quiera dedicar su vida al campo de la ciencia, yo le digo que lo hagan, que vayan a por ellos. Es un campo muy bonito, por supuesto es duro porque te tienes que esforzar, pero estoy segura de que no le va a faltar apoyo, no le va a faltar soporte.
Que persigan sus sueños, que seguro que los puede lograr.
Si le gusta, adelante, sobre todo que le guste y entonces que lo disfrute.
Las animo realmente a que vengan a colaborar con nosotros y nosotras porque es realmente una carrera fascinante, creo que muy bien reconocida y no van a sentir ni rechazo, sino todo lo contrario, se van a sentir impulsadas.
Considero que aún queda cierto camino por recorrer para conseguir una igualdad completa y creo que esto se puede conseguir con iniciativas tan buenas como la que hoy estamos aquí mencionando, que ha sido gracias a la Fundación Real Academia de Ciencias de España y a Mastercard España, que reconocen precisamente el talento científico femenino. Y esto, por supuesto, motiva e impulsa que las jóvenes científicas sigan adelante.
Pues desde aquí, y para empezar, lo primero que querría hacer es agradecer a Salim Ismail que nos haya acompañado en el Meet de este año, así que gracias. Thank you very much, Salim, for such an inspiring session. Y también quiero reconocer la labor de la plataforma de Priceless Planet Coalition de Masterplan, creando una red de cooperación a lo largo y ancho del mundo para construir un mundo más sostenible y también, por supuesto, tan inclusivo. Gracias a esos magníficos premios Frace a las mujeres científicas que me han dicho, por cierto, que este año han recibido 375 aplicaciones. 375 para los premios que Mastercard y Frace entregarán el próximo día 9 de febrero del 2023, con motivo del Día Internacional de la Mujer y la Niña en la Ciencia. Así que, enhorabuena. Y vamos a avanzar con las sesiones, pero antes tengo que hablar de dos cosas. Primero, los pasillos. Es una cuestión de seguridad. Por favor, que nadie se ponga en los pasillos. Segunda cuestión, muy importante también. Todos tenemos uno de estos aparatitos, un traductor. Y es verdad que todos hablamos inglés. Pero ¿qué es lo que pasa con el metaverso, los NFTs, el crecimiento exponencial? Que hay que entenderlo muy bien para tener éxito. Y es muy importante prestar mucha atención en estas sesiones a los detalles. Por todo ello, voy a animar a todos los que estáis aquí a que intentemos utilizarlo si lo vemos necesario y queremos quedarnos con los detalles. Yo me lo voy a poner. Y continuamos así con una sesión muy interesante y dinámica en la que Natalia Leshmanova, economista senior en el Instituto Mastercard, nos va a mostrar algo muy interesante. Las cifras que reflejan el impacto económico de la pandemia en nuestro país, en España. Así que, por favor, join me on welcoming Natalia Leshmanova on stage.
Hello, everyone. Give me just 1 second until I get myself all set up. Here we go. Okay, so it's wonderful to be here with you today in my new hometown. I will speak to you about the state of the Spanish economy in the post-pandemic world. But before we jump in, let me just briefly introduce the Mastercard Economics Institute so it gives you a bit more of a context of where I'm coming from, because some of you may be wondering, what is an economist doing at Mastercard? So at the Institute, we are a group of economists and data scientists who look at the economy through the lens of the consumer. After all, we are Mastercard and perhaps small businesses. And we do that by combining the publicly available data, which is what all economists do, with Mastercard's own aggregated and anonymized sales activity, which allows us to have more nuanced view of the economy that I'm hoping to share with you today, which goes perhaps a little bit more beyond the headlines that you may be reading, which are quite glum. So I'm hoping to tell you a bit more of a positive story. Again, before we jump into the actual meat of the presentation, I thought it would be kind of fun to show you some of the interesting things we can do with our data. So what I'm showing here is a work we have done looking at Madrid and trying to see how certain cultural events are impacting the hospitality sector. So what you see here on the right-hand side is a trend of restaurant sales relative to the pre-pandemic levels, and you can see this big run-up during the Easter time, then a fall, and then another run-up connected to the Madrid Pride. The white line over here represents the pre-pandemic trend. So anything that's over and above the white line means that we're above pre-pandemic trend. Anything that's below means that we're below pre-pandemic trend. On this side here, we show the ranking of different provinces in Spain to see how Madrid has performed relatively in terms of year-on-year growth around these events. So here I'm using our Spending Pulse data, which is our nationwide measure of retail sales. It's very similar in terms of the type of data that you get from statistical offices around Europe, looking at retail sales statistics, but it is different in these three important aspects. One is, as I showed you here, we have the ability to zoom in on particular days of the months. The data is also updated on a more real-time basis. We have updates every week. The official data only comes up once a month, usually with a month to 6 week delay. And then, as I show here on the left-hand side, we also have an ability to zoom in at the performance at the provincial level. So in this case, we were able to see what was happening in Madrid. And then finally, and I think this is really important, which is, I think it will be the theme for the presentation in general, this data also looks at the performance of the services sector. So retail sales data that you read about in the newspapers refers to truly retail sales, the sales of goods. But in this post-pandemic economy that we find ourselves in, it's really the services economy where the consumer strength has been concentrated, and therefore where we should be paying attention in terms of what is really going on with the consumer. So let me just flick through. So here we are on June 1st, which is beginning of Madrid Pride, and you can see that Madrid, in terms of restaurant sales, ranked 21st in a country in terms of year-on-year basis. Don't be scared. The reason it's such a low rank is because Madrid, in terms of aggregate sales, has the biggest sales in terms of restaurant sales. Therefore, the growth rates cannot be as spectacular as when you're looking at a tiny city that's much smaller. But still, let me rewind to July 10th, which was the end of Pride, and you can see that Madrid has climbed from this 21st place to the 7th. If we look at the performance of the hotel sector, so let me go to lodging, it's equally spectacular. The impact is even greater. And again, by the end of Madrid Pride, the rank was 4th in terms of growth in hotel sales across Spain. And again, if I just go back to the beginning, where we started from, to the first day of the Pride, Madrid was 18th. So really, it allows us to see just how much Madrid benefits from these cultural events, from putting on these cultural events. We have the Real Madrid-Chelsea game here. I didn't spend too much time on that because we don't have time, but also because it is mixed in with the Easter effect. During Easter, Madrid does tend to attract a lot of tourists. So with that little warm-up, let me jump into what I was hoping to talk to you about today. I'm hoping to make 3 points. One is that Spanish economy is slowing. It's slowing like the rest of the European economy, but that it's entering this slowdown from a relatively more resilient position. And the reason for that is because Spanish consumers are, on the one hand, balancing the concerns about very high and still rising inflation, and now increasingly rising interest rates on the one hand, with relatively strong consumer fundamentals defined by strong balance sheets and also strong labor market compared to what we're used to in Spain. On the other hand, the labor market is still adding, not losing jobs, and that is providing consumers with comfort to spend money that they do have instead of holding on to them and saving, as is typically the case in slowdowns that we experience. The second point I will make is that just as the pandemic was this really weird recession that was forced upon us and created all kinds of spending habits that were very unusual for how we normally operate. So in advanced economies, people usually spend much more money on services, on enjoying themselves, as opposed to on goods. But during the pandemic, because everything was locked up and because we're just sitting at home in front of our computers, it was the reverse. We're coming out of that, the consumption patterns are normalizing, but still the post-pandemic environment creates a very divided, very bifurcated economy where you can no longer look at the economy in aggregate. You really have to look at how one participates in this economy. So it matters a lot whether you are Spain, as I'll explain in a minute, or Germany in the current environment, whether you are a small company or a large company, where you are as a consumer on the income scale, and whether you are digital or not, because all of these factors determine how well you're going to cope with the uncertainty that's out there. And finally, since I like to end on a positive note, and since this is such an important topic for Spain, I will talk about the travel recovery and where do we see it going going forward. So let's start with inflation. No doubt it has been the greatest challenge that the European and Spanish consumers have faced really since last year. Inflation that we're seeing has really three sources. One is shown in my chart here on the left. This is the pandemic-driven inflation that came from supply chain bottlenecks that were created on the one hand by the lockdowns all over the world, which impacted industrial output, but on the other hand, it was created by this phenomenon I just mentioned, where people were just buying stuff and not spending their money on services. Ultimately, it boiled down to our inability to travel. Because we were spending so much money on goods, especially durable goods like furniture, electronics, home improvement, as we're building our home offices and getting extra screens and preparing for this life at home for the eternity, which turned out thankfully not to be the case, the supply chain simply could not keep up. The good news is, as you can see from this big drop over here, since late last year, the supply chain challenges are easing. They're easing predominantly because consumption patterns are normalizing into spending on services and away from spending on goods. In Europe, of course, this was overlaid with the war in Ukraine and the supply shock on the commodities markets that this created, especially in the gas markets in Europe. So what we show again here on the left is the European gas price, which thankfully has come down nicely in recent weeks. It even fell below 100 yesterday, which is a third of where we were in August. So really positive development. But you can still see that really it's the energy inflation across European countries, including in Spain, although it has come down from this astronomical 60% in March to what it is now at 37% in August, significantly lower. Because of government interventions in the Spanish energy markets and the way electricity is priced, we expect Spanish inflation to continue to go down because the energy inflation is being pulled back. So we have inflation print due tomorrow, and very likely this headline inflation that's now at 9.3 is going to fall sharply below 8% tomorrow, but let's see. The other factor also connected to the war, partly also to the pandemic, is the food prices, and that's increasingly a problem for Spanish inflation. This is really where inflation in Spain is currently predominantly coming from, because food prices have just been so high. And again, this is not only a function of global food prices shown here on the left, because those have come down, but in advanced economies, food prices are mainly a function of labor costs that go into food production and food distribution, and those have been very difficult to fill. We know we have tight labor markets all around Europe, and as a result, we're seeing this increase in food prices. And finally, let me flick back to the headline inflation versus core inflation. Core inflation is inflation without energy and food prices. You can see that even without energy and food prices, inflation is going up. That's because there's a delay in terms of transmission from high energy prices into prices of goods and services, but also because we have the fourth source of inflation that we have to contend with now, and that's coming from the weak euro. Weak euro is not so much of a reflection of the terrible state we're in Europe. It's not the case at all. It's really a reflection of the strong dollar. So really all economies around the world who do not use US dollars are in a similar position. So high inflation has created a cost of living crisis, but what we increasingly have on our hands is the cost of borrowing crisis, as interest rates around the world, including in Europe, are rising very rapidly and very much compared to what we're used to. So we can perhaps feel better that according to market pricing, which is what I'm showing with these curves here, Eurozone ECB's rate is expected to settle at 3%, which is significantly better than 5% in the UK or 5% in the United States. But in Europe, we are more sensitive to high interest rates. That's because we have greater proportion of floating rate mortgages. Again, Spain comes up looking a little bit better compared to its European peers. In Spain, we have about 25 of mortgages that are floating. In countries like the Nordics, it's over 90%. In most of Europe, it's around 50%. So significant proportion, but still in Spain, relatively better. Still, people who hold these mortgages will spend less. People who intended to buy homes are now not going to buy homes because they will not want to borrow at these high mortgage rates. So housing market is going to slow down. But this is not the Eurozone crisis or the global financial crisis. We don't expect a crash in housing prices, and that's because the consumer balance sheets are pretty strong. So if we go to the balance sheet data here, I'm showing both the debt data on the bottom here, so you can see that Spanish households have deleveraged since the financial crisis. They have much lower levels of debt at 57% of GDP. It went up a little bit during the pandemic, but it's back to normal. That's really comparable to Germany, so pretty strong consumer balance sheet position. And that has been also strengthened by accumulation of excess savings that I'm showing here, which is money that people saved over and above what they normally saved in Spain, simply by the virtue of not being able to spend as they normally did. And this is now providing them a cushion to be able to service their mortgages, to maintain their consumption if they want to, because they do have this cash cushion behind them that is helping withhold this shock. The other reason is a strong labor market. Yes, unemployment is still over 12%, but if we look historically, this is really where we were before the global financial crisis. So it's a pretty astonishing achievement. It's a situation, as you can see from the colors on the map, it's really a situation all across Europe. Labor markets are tight, it's hard to hire people. But that too, the fact that labor market is tight means that employers will be more reluctant as we head into the slowdown to let people go because they know how difficult it will be to rehire them again. And that sense of job security is giving people greater confidence to be able to dip into their savings or maybe to borrow on their credit cards to maintain the standard of living. Still, consumers are looking deep into their wallets and they're reprioritizing how they spend. So here again, I'm showing our spending pulse data across the 9 sectors that we track for different European countries just for comparison and the performance this year. So what you can see clearly from this chart is that as prices have gone up, people have definitely spent more on essentials like fuel, to some extent groceries, the growth is positive. They pulled back on spending on these pandemic staples like electronics, home improvement, home furniture, and they really diverted their spending into the fun categories like going out to restaurants, seeing people again, and lodging, which reflects the demand for travel. Apparel has held up well too, because if you're going out and you're traveling again and you're mingling with people, you want to look good, so you freshen up your closet. And so these categories have done exceptionally well. So again, it's not that everything is going down, it's that sales of stuff are going down, but sales of experiences are holding up and really thriving in the current environment. So this brings us to travel. Travel has been an amazing success story of this year. Here we show global bookings for leisure travelers and for business travelers. So leisure travel has recovered about pre-pandemic levels since January, business travel since March, and you can see that both have stayed above pre-pandemic levels since then. I am so surprised to see that. I thought in the spring, okay, we're seeing this bump because everybody is keen to get out, and then it's going to peter out at the end of the summer, but it's not the case. It's still doing well in September. People are planning the next trip over Christmas or over school breaks, maybe even looking into 2023. So it's been truly an amazing story that Spain has hugely benefited from, as you can see here, in terms of Spanish growth in hotel spending compared to last year, or restaurant spending as a result of this rebound in tourism. This is a cool map where we show hotel spending across different European cities. And you can see here we are in August, how Spanish cities are doing compared to other European cities. So green means that you're growing really strongly. London is growing at 272% above pre-pandemic levels. It's a big city. It tops the rankings. But Spanish cities, although the dot is smaller because they're smaller cities, so less spending is happening there. In Madrid, we were 74% above last year's level in terms of hotel spending this year. In Barcelona, 67%. You can see that Barcelona, in terms of dollar spend that it pulls in, was the second in terms of global rankings of cities, second most visited, or second city where most money is spent in August. Madrid has done better in earlier months, so we can see, for example, it's here in July, in top 10, and even better in June and in those cooler months when Madrid is so pleasant for city visits and quick weekend breaks. Finally, I'll mention that the other thing that works towards an advantage in this slowing economy, when we just compare, as I was just showing, the sales in hotel spending in Madrid was stronger than in Barcelona. One reason is that Madrid tends to attract more affluent travelers. So if we look at the data here, affluent share of total spending at hotels in Madrid is 32% of total compared to the rest of Spain, 22% in 2022. And also more online payments, so more kind of techie traveler, maybe more digital nomads, reflecting from this compared to the rest of Spain where this share is much smaller. So these are just some examples of why Spanish economy has done better. One reason is, of course, that it's more decoupled from the energy crisis. It has lower dependence on Russian gas and on gas in general in terms of generating electricity. That's the macro picture. But the second picture is the fact that it has hugely benefited from the pickup in travel. And we think that this pickup in travel, given how resilient bookings have been, is here to stay, even as we're heading into the slowdown, because people now treat travel almost as an essential good. Like you have to dedicate your budget to that and keep traveling even as prices are rising of everything else. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Pues vamos ahora con un bloque muy interesante y sobre todo, diría yo, muy innovador, porque habla de las tecnologías y aplicaciones de la Web3 y en concreto de cómo podemos utilizar los NFTs para mejorar el mundo. ¿Pueden los NFTs mejorar el mundo? Por supuesto que pueden. Y para ello vamos a dar paso a Satbit Sethi, que aunque forma parte del equipo global de activos digitales de Mastercard, hoy viene en calidad de activista de impacto social. Se trata de una persona comprometida con el entorno que está constantemente explorando formas de hacer un cambio positivo a través de la tecnología. Ha recibido reconocimientos, múltiples reconocimientos por su labor de la salud, a favor de la salud mental, y hoy viene a contarnos cómo lo consigue a través de la Web3. Please join me on welcoming Satbit Sethi on stage.
So, a very good afternoon to everyone. My name is Satbit Sethi, and I'm here to talk about Web3 for Good today. So to give you a bit of an introduction, the reason that I'm the only one here that's not wearing a suit is because I'm 24 years old. And as I write on my resume, it means I come with 20 plus years of professional experience. I currently lead global NFT products at Mastercard on the blockchain and digital assets team. But apart from that, I've been a social impact activist and a mental health activist for the past 9 years. I'm a Web3 evangelist, which means anyone and everyone who will listen to me, I'll chew your ear off about Web3. And apart from that, I've been an investor and entrepreneur in the Web3, NFTs, and crypto space for a few years. Outside of work, outside of Mastercard, I've also run many different projects in the Web3 space, recently including Relief that I'm going to be talking about, which was a humanitarian aid initiative that we created to support the people in Ukraine. I'm also the co-founder of Happiness House, which is the world's first mental health resource in the metaverse. And previously, I was the co-founder and CEO at Runaway App, which was one of the world's largest social entrepreneurial ventures for mental health. And we provided free mental health resources to young people all around the world in colleges and high schools. I've been the recipient of the Empower Award 2020 by Mental Health America. I'm on the 25 under 25 list, and I work with tons of amazing organizations, including Mental Health America, United Nations, UNICEF, and so on. So we're here to talk about Web3 today. So could I get a show of hands? Who knows what Web3 is? Okay, yeah, so you're not as old as I thought this audience was going to be, which is great. So before we get into what Web3 is, it'll be important to actually understand what Web2 is, which actually refers to the internet that we all know and use today. It refers to highly centralized digital ecosystems that actually own and use their users. These are companies like some of the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Google. All these companies own your data, they own your assets, and they get to decide if you're allowed to be a part of the ecosystem, if you're allowed to be a digital identity in the online sphere. And Web3 is this new generation of the internet that we're now starting to move towards, which is essentially a decentralized internet where the users are actually in complete control of their data, of their identity, and how they behave and interact in online ecosystems. So while Web3 might not be a term that you've heard too often, the subsets of Web3, which includes things like blockchain technologies, cryptocurrencies, non-fungible tokens or NFTs, decentralized autonomous organizations or DAOs, these are all the different components that make up Web3, and I'm sure you've heard of these at some point. What these technologies do is they're giving power back to the users and taking it away from centralized top-down entities that want to exploit users for personal gain. In Web3, everyone has a say. In Web3, everyone gets to participate, has a seat at the table, and your voice will truly matter in this space. So why are we talking about Web3 here today? Well, obviously, I'm super passionate, and this is all I do for a living, for work. We were at dinner last night, and I absolutely bored everyone to death talking about Web3. But the reason that I'm so passionate about this is because even though I'm quite young, in my lifetime, I've already seen a lot of bad things happen. I've had friends who've had their assets seized by banks. I've had friends who've lost rounds of funding just because of a tweet they might have made. We hear a lot about people being, deplatformed from social media recently, and all these things exist because centralized entities control you. And that's why I think Web3 is so important and so extremely powerful, because it really allows people to have that control. And to make it easier today, I've split Web3 into 3 components that I would assume are probably the most important for the audience here. So the first one that we're going to talk about is cryptocurrency. And the reason that cryptocurrency is such an amazing and powerful tool is firstly because it provides speed and efficiency. You no longer have to wait 3 to 5 business days for banks to actually process your transactions, check everything, KYC, maybe even stop your transaction or your check bounces. None of that happens in cryptocurrency. You have a wallet, you have the person who's going to receive your crypto, you send it, and instantly it's gone. The second thing is the low service and transaction fees. We know, Mastercard included, banks, we all charge some really nice service fees and transaction fees, which is our bread and butter at the end of the day. But cryptocurrency minimizes this to an extent. By actually removing some of these service fees and the transaction fees associated with moving around cryptocurrency. You can right now send millions of dollars across the globe in international transfer for just a few dollars. And this kind of cost efficiency is just unprecedented and something that we've never ever seen before in our lifetime. The third benefit of crypto is that it's secure and transparent. And I know many people here are going to say, well, crypto sounds like a fraud, it's a scam, it's not secure. Trust me, it's one of the most transparent ways that you can transact today, because when you look at public blockchains like Ethereum, like Bitcoin, every single transaction that a person makes is available for anyone in this room to review. My wallet address for Ethereum is satvik.eth. You can go on etherscan.io right now, put that in, and you can see a record of all my transactions over the past 2 years that I've been in this space, see exactly who I sent it to, how much money I transacted, how much money I made, but please don't rob me afterwards. And finally, we're going to talk about how crypto is sovereign and permissionless. So the money that you own is truly yours to keep. There's no one that can take that away from you. There's no one that can say your assets are now frozen. You can no longer use them. You no longer have banks or financial entities that are saying, you know, we're going to now start treating your savings account as an investment, and therefore we're cutting off access to it, or we're parking tanks outside our bank so you can't get in to take your money back. Those things just don't happen in crypto because your money is truly your money. The second thing that I want to talk about are NFTs, which is one of the biggest hot topics of this moment. Everyone is really divided on what NFTs are, if they're useful, if they're a fraud. But first, I think it's really important to understand what non-fungible tokens really mean. So when we think about paper money, or even digital money for that matter, so say you take $1 or €1, $1 to the other dollar is exactly the same value. You could give me $1 and I'll give you $1 back, and it has the same intrinsic value, there's no difference. That money is fungible. It's the same thing when you think about cryptocurrencies like Ethereum. One Ethereum to another is indistinguishable. It's the exact same value. It's the exact same kind of quantified number that you're getting, right? But when we think about non-fungible, what this means is they're not the same value, and therefore they can't be exchanged one-to-one. And that is because NFTs, each and every single NFT, is completely unique. This is because there's underlying levels of metadata with each NFT that make it completely unique and completely verifiable. And what this does is it makes NFTs an excellent tool to prove ownership and to prove authenticity of digital assets. And like I said, you know, they're unique and verifiable. So again, you could go on any of these open marketplaces, exchanges, Etherscan again, and you could actually find the contract address for each NFT. It'll tell you exactly who's owned this NFT, so it'll give you complete provenance, and it'll tell you all the metadata, all the different properties that's stored in it. So when you actually start to think about it, even though today we talk about, you know, Bored Apes and we talk about digital art selling for millions of dollars as NFTs, the use cases that you could tap into using this technology are really unlimited. We recently saw a whole housing complex that was sold as an NFT, and everything, you know, including the number of bedrooms, the size of the property, the ownership deed, everything was part of the metadata. We're seeing companies sell yachts as NFTs, automobile industry, digital archival, and all these things are happening because NFTs are truly verifiable and they're truly unique, and you have that provenance with it. And finally, we'll talk about the metaverse, which is, again, a really intriguing topic on everyone's mind. Some of the biggest companies in the world, including Mastercard, are starting to experiment with them. And the biggest reason why metaverses are so amazing are because they're completely accessible and inclusive. When we think about events like this, or just events in general, even your remote work environments, it's still a lot of cost barriers associated with it. People have to actually fly down, come here, book a hotel room. We have to all gather here today. You might have some disabilities that might prevent you from showing up. With a metaverse, anything is possible. You can truly be part of a metaverse experience from just about anywhere in the world. All you need is a simple device that can run a metaverse platform. The second great thing about the metaverse is that it allows people to create completely immersive and unique experiences. You know, right now, we're all sitting down, super calm, listening to me talk and give you my whole gospel about NFTs. If we were in the metaverse, there'd be flashing lights behind me, there'd be music, you would be flying all across this room while I would be talking to you. And those kind of things are really an extension of reality that's never been possible before. So it really does allow us to live out some of our best fantasies, some of our best dreams, while still congregating and having that social networking experience of being together, which is something that was definitely accelerated during the pandemic. We also saw how remote work became really important, connecting online became really important, and we're all tired of just sitting in front of Zoom with our cameras on, sometimes off if we need to eat or talk to our fiancés. But that kind of change is coming with the metaverse, because now we can all actually stand next to each other, hang out, actually talk, show each other different objects, and that's the level of social networking that we're truly still missing in digital experiences. And finally, it reduces the cost barriers for companies. Metaverse installations and activations are significantly cheaper than any kind of event that you could organize, because all you need is a digital space and a little link that says, show up here at this time, and that's it. You don't need any of this expensive lighting, sound, the hundreds of technicians. None of that matters in the metaverse, because all you just need is a space to congregate. So hopefully that gives you a bit of clarity and understanding as to why I'm so passionate about Web3. And the reason that we're here today, and I'm here today, is to talk about Web3 for good specifically. We've heard kind of the corporate side of it, we've heard how it might be useful to companies, but how can people really use Web3 for good, which inherently does still seem about money and transactions and hosting events? Well, Web3 for good is a really interesting concept which allows us to use this emerging technology that's truly decentralized and all about community building to actually do well by doing good. Web3 is now constantly being adopted by more and more nonprofit organizations across the world. In the past 2 years, there's been hundreds and hundreds of millions that have been raised by some of the largest nonprofits using cryptocurrency fundraisers, NFT sales, metaverse activations, and it's just completely reopened a new model for all social impact organizations, or anyone for that matter, who cares about social impact, to actually start doing well by using a new technology, something that previously was just never possible. So today I'm going to talk about some of the different projects that I myself have worked on to facilitate Web3 for good. The first example that I want to use is Relief, which I co-founded at the start of this year. It was a humanitarian aid initiative that was specifically created to help the people of Ukraine. Now, what's interesting about this is, Friday night, one of my friends tweeted, "We have such an amazing community in Web3, why can't we do something to help Ukraine?" 10 minutes later, I saw the tweet, I set up a group chat. 3 of us were in that group chat. We stayed up all night. 24 hours later, we released an NFT collection. In that 24 hours, we reached out to artists across the world, some of our favorite people, really well-established artists. We got them to create and donate some art to us. 24 hours later, we released 7,700 NFTs using 23 artists that were part of this first drop. We raised $1 million in 30 seconds to donate to Ukraine in its entirety. With our second drop, we were able to bring that total closer to 2 million. And the best part about this is we sent all this money within a single day to multiple organizations across Ukraine that were able to instantly use it in cryptocurrency. Now, to juxtapose this to a Web2 ecosystem, one of the biggest fundraisers that was created for Ukraine by a Web2 company was actually a fundraiser on Instagram. This fundraiser ran for an entire month and raised just about $1 million and had tens of thousands of people donating. In comparison, we raised $1 million in 30 seconds, which is 3,000 people participating in this collection. The other amazing aspect of this is that we were able to actually instantly send that money out. Imagine if we had that $1 million and I had to cash it out to my bank. I'd be on every single watch list in the world, and there'd be people knocking at my door to see what I'm up to. With crypto, we could instantly send it out. People were using it within that week. And to just look at some of the impact that we were able to create, the funds that we sent in Ethereum and sent completely in Ethereum to over 15 different organizations were instantly used to buy military equipment, medical and food supplies. They bought an entire ambulance, as well as we were able to transport a lot of refugees out of Ukraine using buses and bus drivers that were taking cryptocurrency as their mode of payment. So this is just one of the many examples in which you can actually use crypto and NFTs to foster a lot of positive change and a lot of good in this world. The second example that I want to talk about is Happiness House, which is the world's first mental health resource in the metaverse that I co-founded late last year. And this is essentially an expansive mental health resource that provides all the components of a typical physical mental health clinic, but just completely digitally and completely for free, making it accessible for everyone. So when we think about what this looks like, it's, we've kind of gamified the elements of therapy, of peer support. So you have communal spaces like our library, where people can congregate, interact with other users. We have peer support volunteers that are highly trained in a curriculum that was designed partly by me and partly by experts that I worked with in the past during my mental health activism journey. And people can congregate here, meet peer support volunteers who are highly trained, talk to them about their mental health, and find all the different support and resources that they need. Apart from that, we also have private spaces for one-to-one professional therapy. So we have therapists who've reached out to us instead of us reaching out to them because they wanted to so desperately be a part of actually doing something nice. So people can book one-to-one therapy and get those therapy sessions in these private rooms. We have some amazing, really cool spaces like the Open Air Amphitheater, where we plan to host many, stand-up comedy shows, movie nights, music concerts, just immersive experiences that bring people together while also learning and talking about mental health. And finally, we have multiple other spaces like our flower gardens, our Zen rooms, our tea houses, where people can just congregate, learn about mental health. There's a bunch of puzzles and entertaining things that they could do to just take care of their wellness. And it's examples like these that truly show you how you can harness these technologies that are really available for every single person in this room right now to actually do some good and give back to the world that we're all a part of, because that's what Web3 is all about. And finally, because I am still the NFT product lead at Mastercard, I do need to shout out some of the work that we've done at Mastercard. For us, the blockchain and digital assets team, as well as our global marketing teams, have been quite keen and quite forward-thinking in essentially exploring the Web3 space and seeing what kind of different work can we bring to this space and what kind of value can we add to this entire ecosystem. And one of the things that we did this year during Pride Month was actually extending some of the priceless experiences that we typically have in the physical world into Decentraland by sponsoring the Decentraland LGBTQIA+ Pride Float, as well as having our own Pride Plaza, where users, customers, consumers, anyone could actually attend it. It was completely free and open to all. You could come and get free NFTs just for participating. You could be a part of many different events that were being hosted, and just an amazing communal space for people to come together. So hopefully this has been inspiring in the slightest on what Web3 for Good is all about and what the power of this technology can be harnessed for. I'm Satvik Sethi, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have for me today. Thank you so much. Are there any questions in the room? Okay, awesome. So thank you so much. I'll be around. If you have any questions, come up to me. You saw my socials, hopefully, so feel free to reach out online as well. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Y a continuación viene una conferencia muy interesante bajo el título Making Sense of the Metaverse. Llega Cathy Hackle, reconocida mundialmente como la madrina del metaverso, futurista tecnológica y fundadora y Chief Metaverse Officer de Journey. Let's receive with a big applause to Cathy Hackle.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Madrid, ¿cómo están? ¿Bien? ¿Necesitan cafecito? Yo hablo español, viví en Madrid un par de años, de hecho mi hijo nació acá, es gato, eso es lo que decimos, pero mi charla va a ser en inglés, en Spanglish, ¿ok? ¿Estamos bien con el Spanglish? Y espero que a mí sí me hagan preguntas porque vamos a hablar del metaverso, which is a little complicated, but I think Satvik actually set it up really well. So we're going to be navigating into the metaverse right now, try to make sense of this term. With anything I present, I always start by saying that as a futurist, as a professionally trained futurist, I do take the long-term view, so I'm trying to think about the next 100 years. Por ejemplo, no cierren sus ojos, pero si cierran sus ojos y piensan en Madrid en 100 años, ¿cómo se vería? Entonces, yo pienso mucho en el long-term view en los próximos 100 años y veo 3 áreas muy interesantes. Obviamente, mejor entender nuestra inteligencia y nuestros cerebros y cómo pensamos, ya sea inteligencia artificial o inteligencia humana. También el espacio, todo lo que está pasando en el espacio y las compañías, ya sea SpaceX o Blue Origin, que están explorando el espacio. Y en esta charla vamos a pasar tiempo en este círculo azul que le llamamos el metaverso. Y como dijo la persona de Mastercard que habló temprano, todo lo que es climate change, we cannot have any of this progress, and we cannot have that promise of the metaverse or Web3 if we do not take care of the physical world. So I think it's really important to always phrase that. All right, so a little bit about me. They do call me the godmother of the metaverse. Someone from Nike's metaverse team gave me that name. I didn't give it to myself. But I've been in metaverse-related industries for almost 10 years. Llevo una década entera trabajando en tecnología de metaverso. Empecé primero con una compañía española que se llamaba Future Lighthouse, que ya no existe, pero que hacía contenido de realidad virtual increíble. Luego pasé a una compañía que se llamaba HTC Vive, no sé si algunos lo conocen, pero hacen visores. También hacían teléfonos, todavía los hacen. And when I was there, I actually worked as their VR evangelist during the company's partnership with Steven Spielberg's adaptation of Ready Player One. Who here has seen Ready Player One? Okay, so that's not the metaverse. We're going to talk about that, okay? But that's not the metaverse. And then I went over to work at Magic Leap, which many of you that know the company or don't know the company, at one point we thought it was the next Apple. It hasn't been that case. But when I worked there, I went to work with amazing people. This is a picture of some of the people I got to work with. And the man that my avatar is right next to is actually Neil Stephenson, who coined the term metaverse in his sci-fi novel, Snow Crash, right? So I've been working in this space for a long time, worked to Amazon Web Services after that, worked on large-scale gaming simulations, and now I run my own company, and my title is Chief Metaverse Officer. So a new kind of job. There is actually another Chief Metaverse Officer in Madrid. So Telefónica has a Chief Metaverse Officer. Her name is Jaisa. She happens to be a woman as well, so very happy about that. All right, so as we prepare to go into the metaverse, hype versus reality. A ver, ¿quiénes aquí creen que el metaverso es el futuro? Uy. Wow, okay, tough crowd, people. All right, I have a lot of convincing to do. All right, so I guess a lot of you guys are concerned about the metaverse. So let's talk about hype versus reality. The reality is that the metaverse in its full form is not here yet. It is being built today. And therein lies the opportunity of the metaverse. And when I say metaverse, I mean like capital M metaverse. Metaverso con mayúscula M, okay? Other people use the terms metaverse, lowercase m, virtual worlds. We're going to talk a little bit about that. It is being built today. So as Sadvik mentioned, he's very involved in what is Web3. This is a great way to show how the internet has evolved, because any presentation about the internet has to have cats. Okay, you have to have cats in there, all right? So Web 1, connected information, that gave us the internet, that changed a lot of things. Then you got Web 2, and that connected people, and gave us the tech juggernauts of today with the social media companies, but it also gave us e-commerce and the sharing economy. And what's happening right now, we're almost in like Web 2.5, getting towards Web 3. So Web 3 over here connects people, places, and things, or people, spaces, and assets. And these people, spaces, and assets can sometimes be in fully virtual environments, but they will also be in the physical world, right? And that is where the opportunity also lies. So what is the metaverse? That's the question everyone asks. The reality is that we don't really know, okay? We're trying to define something that doesn't currently exist. For me and for many of us in the industry, we agree it is the successor state to today's mobile internet. So once again, get away from the hype. The word metaverse is very hypey and very polluted. What we're talking about here is the successor state of today's mobile internet. So if the mobile internet changed your careers, your lives, everything that you do, how you work, things are about to change as well. So it's about virtual shared experiences that happen both in virtual spaces, but also the physical world is a further convergence of our physical and digital lives. It's an internet that is more immersive, that is around us, that is persistent, and like Satvik mentioned, is very social. If you wanted a textbook definition, this is probably a great one from my friend Matthew Ball. This is if you really want to start to define it a little bit more in that way. The metaverse is enabled by many different technologies. So augmented reality, virtual reality, blockchain, NFTs, 5G, 6G, we're actually going to need 6G for it, anything. You can actually grab any technical jargon and put it in there, and it's probably going to be an enabling technology. I'll tell you what it is not, but I'm very clear that it is not. It is not one single technology. It is not just virtual reality. It is not Ready Player One. Okay, no one wants to live in a world where you're living inside the headset and the physical world is horrible and you want to escape to it. So please, it is not Ready Player One. It is not just virtual reality. And it is not just one company. All right, I get that all the time. Like, do you work for Meta? I'm like, no. I have nothing to do with Meta. Not one single company will create the metaverse or be able to kind of rule the metaverse. So Web3 and the metaverse, Satvik obviously mentioned his vision and views on Web3. I agree with him. Web3 is a massive opportunity for humanity, for us to be able to reclaim data and have data ownership. And this is a really, really simple way of understanding the difference. All right, so when you're talking about Web3, in my perspective, you're talking about the underlying architecture of how those people, spaces, and assets are connected in that future state of the internet. When you talk about the metaverse, you're really talking about more about how we're going to experience that future state of the internet. But very important, this is my advice to anyone I talk to, and this is something that I do and I preach. Don't seek to define it. Seek to build it. This is the opportunity. Nothing is gained by us debating a definition of something that is going to change and is going to evolve. More is gained by what we build today. Why does this matter? I want to know, show of hands, ¿cuántos aquí de ustedes tienen niños que juegan videojuegos como Roblox, Fortnite? ¿Algunos? All right, perfecto. We all seem to work for Roblox and Fortnite because all our money goes there. If you're a parent, you know. This is why it matters, because things are changing. We have to change our chip, our mindset. My son's first concert was during the pandemic. And you're probably like, what? Like during the pandemic, no one was going to concerts. You know, for most of us, we went to maybe un lugar como este, un teatro, o algún lugar a ver un concierto con nuestro artista favorito. Ojalá, espero que no haya sido Locomía, pero bueno, en fin. Para mi hijo, su primer concierto fue Little Nas X en un videojuego, una plataforma de videojuegos que se llama Roblox. Y él dice, yo estuve ahí, yo vi a Nas. Lo importante aquí es que esa línea tan demarcada que tenemos algunas generaciones entre lo que es físico y lo que es virtual, ya casi no es tan clara, especialmente para las generaciones nuevas. So yes, just because it happens in a virtual world does not make it less real, especially for younger generations or for anyone that's a gamer, okay? And gaming is the on-ramp. Gaming has never been hotter, all right? Gaming is the on-ramp. And it's not just all fun and games. This is not a talk about like Roblox versus Fortnite and how cool this game is and Call of Duty. No. The underlying gaming engines that we use to create this content are incredibly important and are helping power the things that will come. So it's not all fun and games. Gaming is the on-ramp and the parent to the metaverse. Why does it matter? Because everyone in Silicon Valley or that is working on innovation is trying to replace our phones. All right, there's only so many more cameras we can add to a phone. We got Dynamic Island from Apple a couple weeks ago, come on. Okay, we're gonna be moving away from our phones into some type of wearable, potentially glasses, all right? And not VR headsets, we're talking about glasses. You almost have to start to think about the metaverse and the future of the internet in layers, right? We're in a physical layer, layer 0 right now, which is Madrid, right? We're all physical beings, we're here. But you guys, I see some of you guys with your phones not paying attention, you know, computers, whatever. We're all giving tons of data. There's tons of data we're producing from our phones, our watches, our computers, you know, the AV team. We can't see that, right? We can't really see that data. But once you start putting a wearable on that allows you to see all that data, you'll see it in the form of annotations, in the form of holograms, in many different forms, right? So you're going to start to see, you're not going to consume it in ones and zeros, because most of us do not consume content in ones and zeros, but you're going to start to see that data layer, right? And on top of that data layer is going to be an information layer, a payment layer, a security layer. There's going to be tons of different layers on top of the physical world, and we're going to be able to see them and blend physical and digital. So what is the impact that this has? Let's start with society from a macro level. From a positive perspective, you're going to have new jobs being created that are going to unlock creativity in ways we've never seen, right? This is actually a line from Shelley Palmer. It's going to allow creators to share in the value of their creations. You're already starting to see that with what Sadvik shared, with all these creators jumping on and helping fundraising and creating all this NFT art. It's going to make our world machine readable, those layers, right? You're going to be seeing the data that autonomous vehicles and robots are going to see. You're not going to see it in ones and zeros. Community and authenticity have never been more important. And once again, the concept of work is evolving and changing. The concept of career, you know, was explained earlier. We're living longer. You know, our parents probably had a job most of their lives. The idea of having the same job for the rest of my life actually is kind of scary. Okay, so for most of us it is. When you're talking about Web3 ecosystems, there's massive opportunities around tokenized real estate. Like Sadvik mentioned, you know, a house was just sold as an NFT. There's a lot of houses, a lot of things happening in real estate, both virtual real estate, but also physical real estate with a digital tie. Governance tokens, token-gated e-commerce, token-gated commerce is huge, or will be huge. There's just a lot of different implications. What does it mean for business? It means that your customers are going to try new experiences and new identities. They're willing to try new things. They're going to experience new environments and try new brands. A great example of this is a company called Artifact that was bought by Nike at the end of last year, good friends of mine. That company wasn't around 3 years ago. And now they're launching partnerships with Rimowa tomorrow. Like, this company is massive and huge, bought by Nike. That's a brand that wasn't around. So there's new brands and products and services coming, new revenue streams. We're going to talk more about that. It is a time to experiment and innovate. And for you, it's going to enable new customer touchpoints and new customer journeys. Commerce itself is evolving. We all know how to do physical to physical commerce. We go to El Corte Inglés, and we come out with a lot of stuff we didn't need to buy. So we know how to do that really well, right? Then you added a digital layer. You got e-commerce, which is still a flat experience. It's not fun. Then you have the virtual to virtual commerce, which has been happening in gaming economies for decades and is actually worth more than the entertainment industry. But that's, you know, that's me buying a sword in Minecraft, my son buying a skin in Roblox. That is thriving. It's really hot right now. There's 2 more commerce models that I do a lot of work around. These have not been done at scale. This is the impact. There's the virtual to physical model. I am in Roblox, I'm in Call of Duty, I'm in a game, Genshin Impact, whatever it is, and I do something that allows me to purchase an item, and maybe that item arrives at my house in physical form or unlocks a physical experience for me. Or the juxtaposition, which is I am at an event like this, or maybe I'm in Ibiza or in Coachella, and I have an experience that unlocks something for my virtual identity, right? These have not been done at scale, but this is how commerce is evolving. What is the market opportunity? Trillions of dollars, you know, tons of numbers. I'm not going to tell you what the number is. It's just too big to ignore. That's why companies like Mastercard, you guys are already looking at what to do, and it will potentially impact every aspect of our lives because the holy grail is merging physical and digital. It's a time to build. You know, many of you guys are building in virtual worlds. Virtual worlds right now are gaming platforms, the reality, and there's 2 types. There's centralized platforms and there's decentralized platforms. The centralized platforms are, for example, Fortnite, Roblox, that are controlled by one company. The decentralized ones, like Decentraland, where I believe you guys have done some things, or I think Satvik mentioned that, those are decentralized. They tend to be on the blockchain. There is some level of ownership. This is some example. A lot of these centralized ones are starting to flirt with the decentralized side. How will you build? Why will you build? I think this is really important when you start to think about building inside these worlds. Why would you build in these spaces, and what do people want to see from you? Conversational AI, I mean artificial intelligence, massive and huge. One of the things that I think a lot about is, if we are going to be wearing glasses, are we going to be typing into virtual keyboards? No, we're going to be talking. We're going to be talking to our glasses. Eventually, our glasses are going to know what we think. That's further down the line. But conversational AI has never become more important. You can actually activate websites right now. I can go, for example, it doesn't happen right now at Loewe, but you could go to the Loewe website, hypothetically, and you could speak to it and say, muéstrame todos los bolsos negros de la colección del verano, bla, bla, bla. Y con voz, el website te puede mostrar. Eso va a cambiar e-commerce bastante. There are ethical challenges when it comes to AI. We see this a lot with everything that's happening with artificial intelligence art, generative art, and copyright, who owns what, should things be accepted? NFTs and blockchains. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I feel like Satvik really shared with you guys what an NFT is. He did a great way. He had a great way of explaining it, so I'm not going to go into it. What I will show you, you know how I talked about customer journeys? This is a very simple example of an NFT customer journey that didn't exist till NFTs launched. Okay, so this is how do I create an NFT and then actually eventually have it in someone's wallet. So if you're interested, definitely take a picture of this one. Now, I'll get to the more fun part of my talk. Now that we've kind of tried to make sense of the metaverse, I'll tell you how I metaverse. And I'm using it as a verb because I can. Why not? So I'm going to show you a video. I was the first person that was able to ring the bell at NASDAQ, both in the physical world and in the virtual world as well.
I can't help but feel that there's a creativity renaissance upon us, and what we build matters more than ever. As the co-founder of Journey, I am not the typical face that you see when you think of technology, so that's why it's important for everyone to know that this future is for all of us. In the metaverse, we are all world builders, and this is our time to build. Let's seek not to define the metaverse, but let's build it and create it together.
Here are the opening bells at the NASDAQ Journey Innovation and Design Consultancy.
It is Journey, creator of immersive experiences, ringing the bell in the metaverse.
Me fascina cómo termina el video. Pero estamos viendo cómo muchas compañías empiezan a mezclar lo físico con lo virtual. Lo van a ver más y más. Sé que Mastercard está haciendo cosas muy interesantes. How do you NFT? Obviously, Satvik mentioned a lot about the NFTs, and Salim, when he was up here, he talked about being a bored ape. I'm a mutant ape, so I'm going to flex my ape as well. That's part of my collection. Where do I join these? Where do I buy NFTs? And this is not financial advice, all right, everyone. I buy these NFTs because I like to have access to those communities and the experiences that they give me. We also create offices in a lot of these virtual worlds. We use them not so much as a marketing ploy, we use them to recruit. So for example, in our Roblox office, which you see here, if I'm looking for Roblox developers, I might meet with them inside our Roblox build and ask them, what would you do differently before I even take it to Zoom? I work with a lot of companies and brands to create well thought out strategies. So Clinique, Procter & Gamble, have been able to work with them on creating experiences and strategies that focus on community, very important. Work with a lot of governments as well, the US government or the city of Orlando, to try to understand what their role is in the future of the metaverse. This is an example of a project I did with the United States Air Force. They had a 90-page PDF report that no one is going to read, right? And we actually took those 90 pages and brought them into virtual reality and used holograms to show 4 potential futures that obviously haven't existed. I have a podcast, which I know some of you guys are fans of. They reached out to me, where I try to explain what the metaverse is and what it means for brands in very simple terms. I build community. That's a really easy way to build. I build a community called People of the Metaverse, which creates metaverse salons to talk about the challenges, like mental health that Sadvik mentioned, the challenges that are upon us. I work with companies like Walmart to create and bring them into virtual worlds. I'm not going to show you this video. I am going to show you the next one because I know we're running out of time. One of the really biggest things that you're going to see and continue to see is the virtualization of entertainment. So concerts in the metaverse, I'm sure many of you guys have read about it or seen things. I actually got to produce one of those concerts for Walmart. I'm going to show you this quick video. It was 3 artists, 3 songs per artist, 30 minutes, a whole festival inside Walmart Land, which is a world that my company and I built for Walmart as they enter the space.
This is sick. I am gonna wear this spandex suit.
Love it.
So sick, bro.
Can I have the measurements, Michael?
Like an alien.
Whoa, I feel like I'm in the Matrix. Right?
I might need to tighten that.
Calibration, please. Turn around for me.
We're gonna recalibrate.
Bro, this is so swaggy.
All right, here we go. This is a take. Mocap states. And playback.
Like grand. Only ones I keep around me is my fam. I know everything will be okay. Too dangerous. I saw it outside in my head.
So once again, adding the physical and the virtual and merging them together. What does that mean for you? It means there is a time of reinvention, both for your companies, but also for yourselves as careers. What are you going to do? What is your role? Do you want to lead? It also is about new companies being created, new opportunities, new acquisitions, new challenges as well. Lots of potential risks. I'm actually going to add mental health to one of the risks here next time I do this talk after listening to Sadvik. And I'm going to leave you with a video from Adobe that can show you what the metaverse could become. We all have such dystopic views of the metaverse, Ready Player One, right? This is a different vision of what merging the physical and the digital could be.
Play music.
Okay. There's been an update to your calendar.
Show calendar.
There's an accident ahead. Should I show you an alternate route?
Yes. Show bio. Save to libraries.
Oh, hey, Jordan.
Hey, Rory.
Yeah.
I saw this on my ride in. Might be cool. Climb down.
It seems that you're making lasagna. Should I turn on the oven?
Yes, preheat oven to 400. Open preferences.
Una visión no tan distópica del futuro, algo entretenida, y nada más los voy a dejar con esto, que siempre lo digo, en el metaverso todos podemos construir mundos, es la hora de ir a construir, espero que construyan cosas nuevas. Gracias.
Mensajes muy innovadores e inspiradores que nos animan a construir, y por ello llega el momento de compartir algunas conclusiones, de manera que voy a dar la entrada al siguiente invitado, pero no se va nadie de aquí, porque después voy a venir a organizar las siguientes sesiones, voy a explicar cómo nos distribuimos, de manera que tenemos este momento de conclusiones y seguimos aquí porque explicaré cómo nos organizamos con las sesiones paralelas. Hablamos de conclusiones, pero no es el final de ninguna de las maneras de esta jornada, de ninguna. Entonces, voy a dar la bienvenida y voy a invitar al escenario a Alejandro Vanegas, director de Desarrollo de Negocio de Mastercard España. Así que un fuerte aplauso para Alejandro, por favor.
Muy buenos días a todos. Un placer ver tantísimas caras conocidas después de casi 3 años sin poder tener esta oportunidad de interactuar, de compartir nuevas tendencias en el mercado, de experimentar con la tecnología. Y una edición que para nosotros es muy especial porque también la hemos aprovechado para innovar, para cambiar el formato y para hacerlo aún más interesante. Quería, en primer lugar, agradeceros a todos vosotros que habéis hecho hoy un espacio importante en vuestra agenda, que sabemos que es muy complicado en este último trimestre del año. Y, por supuesto, agradecer también a todos los que nos estáis siguiendo online y que no habéis podido uniros al evento de hoy y poder participar también en esta sesión que vamos a dar cierre a su primera parte y que, como decía Silvia, nuestra moderadora, continuará con más contenidos muy interesantes. Y también me gustaría, evidentemente, agradecer a todos nuestros speakers. En primer lugar, nuestras ejecutivas que han estado abriendo la sesión, Emer Craven, nuestra presidenta de la División del Sur de Europa, Paloma Real, nuestra directora general de Mastercard España, y, por supuesto, a todos los expertos que hemos tenido hoy en temas tan increíbles como el cambio que van a tener las organizaciones a futuro y todos los nuevos ámbitos de innovación como son el metaverso o Web3. Y todo ha girado alrededor del lema Together Towards Tomorrow. Y esto es muy importante porque todo lo que ha pasado la pandemia ha golpeado a muchos sectores, ha cambiado mucho la dinámica en el mundo de pagos, pero en muchas industrias. Y esto refuerza el poder de las alianzas y la necesidad de unir fuerzas para poder desarrollar proyectos a futuro. Y esto lo hemos estado ocurriendo durante toda la sesión de hoy. El punto de partida es que tenemos buenas noticias, como hemos visto hoy gracias a nuestra economista del Mastercard Economic Institute, donde el punto de partida de España es muy positivo. Hemos recuperado bien la crisis en casi todos los factores y estamos mejor preparados que otros mercados por la idiosincrasia de nuestro mercado, por estar protegidos mejor contra la crisis energética, por tener un modelo de loans, de préstamos menos dependiente en tipos de interés variable. Y en el mundo de pagos hemos tenido también un cambio muy importante. Como comentaba Paloma al arranque de la sesión, ¿quién nos iba a decir hace 3 años que casi 9 de cada 10 transacciones en comercio físico las íbamos a hacer en contactless, ¿no? O cómo íbamos a ver esta explosión tan grande del mundo de e-commerce que ha crecido tantísimo. Y a futuro, bueno, pues los principales retos que hemos comentado en la sesión son claramente el foco en la experiencia de usuario y cómo hacemos que la experiencia de usuario en compras digitales o en entorno físico sea sencilla, qué nuevos modelos de negocio se van a instaurar y cómo podemos habilitarlos, que serán modelos de negocio que no necesariamente pasan por raíles tradicionales, y sobre todo las nuevas tecnologías y la regulación que van a configurar un nuevo entorno. Pero no solo ha cambiado el mundo de pagos, no solo ha cambiado el panorama económico, sino que también está cambiando de forma muy rápida, y no solo en los últimos 3 años, sino hacemos una visión un poquito más larga, de 5 o 10 años, cómo está cambiando el futuro de las organizaciones y cómo las organizaciones se van a preparar para un cambio tan radical de crecimiento que ya venía sucediendo en muchas industrias. Hemos visto esta mañana de manos de Salim Ismail el ejemplo en el ámbito de energía, ¿no? Cómo negocios que operan en bases de energía más tradicionales van a tener que reformularse porque el precio de la energía solar, que puede ser el futuro de muchos negocios, ha bajado 150 veces en valor. Esto es una serie de retos porque se está digitalizando todo, estamos construyendo coches en base a aplicaciones y no al revés, se está democratizando el uso de la tecnología, y esto lo que hace es que la curva de aprendizaje sea mucho más rápida, y si nos enfocamos en nuestro día a día, pues va a ser muy difícil que podamos estar adaptados al nuevo modelo. Entonces, un poco la recomendación que nos daba esta mañana Ismail es que es muy importante adaptarse a estos nuevos retos. Y hemos también tocado otros ámbitos muy interesantes en el ámbito de innovación, en los nuevos canales, Web3 de manos de Sadik Serit, donde evidentemente las principales aplicaciones que todos conocemos son NFTs, metaverso y criptodivisas, pero hay formas muy interesantes de aprovecharse de esta tecnología para impulsar un mundo más sostenible y más inclusivo, que permita apalancar proyectos como el de Relief o el de Natural House que ha explicado Satik. Muy interesantes y que encajan mucho con nuestra filosofía de compañía. Y por último hemos hablado del metaverso. Aquí la reflexión principal es que esto no es un tema exclusivamente digital, es muy importante el doble mundo y la conexión entre el mundo digital y físico, donde se van a desarrollar oportunidades espectaculares para todo el mundo, en un ámbito en el que va a haber que ser mucho más creativo, va a haber que adaptar a los modelos de negocio, y bueno, como compañía evidentemente estamos invirtiendo en ese tipo de espectro para poder sacar valor y ver qué oportunidades puede dar nuevas, por ejemplo, experiencias de pago que pueden ser, como comentaba Cathy, de virtual a digital hacia un mundo físico. Sin más, el evento, como habéis visto, tenía también mucho foco en explorar cosas que estamos haciendo en el ámbito de sostenibilidad y en el ámbito de inclusión, y espero que hayáis disfrutado tanto como yo de este evento. Y vamos a dar paso a la siguiente sesión, que es una sesión donde vais a poder profundizar mucho más en tecnología y en ámbitos súper relevantes como son la innovación que podemos compartir con vosotros de mano de nuestras startups, de nuestro programa de innovación abierta, StartPath, entender mucho más estas implicaciones de ciberseguridad en la parte de criptodivisas y entender cómo esto a vuestras entidades os puede estar afectando y cuáles son los desafíos ahí. Y, por supuesto, turismo. No nos podemos olvidar del ámbito de turismo, que es tan importante en este mercado. Como nos decía nuestra economista, es la principal herramienta, una de las principales herramientas que nos ha hecho mantenernos resilientes ante la crisis. Nada más, muchas gracias y espero que sigáis disfrutando de la sesión durante el resto del día de hoy.
Pues solo nos queda una sesión y ahora vamos a tener las paralelas. Son estas sesiones que estábamos esperando ahora, donde nos vamos a dividir. Pero después de esta sesión, las paralelas, viene algo brutal. Me han dicho que diga priceless, no puedo contar nada, me encantaría, pero yo os puedo decir que no dudaría en quedarme. Así que llega el momento de las últimas sesiones, las 3 interesantísimas. La mala noticia es que tienen lugar en paralelo, por lo que tendréis que escoger en cuál de ellas seguir. Aunque muchos ya habéis elegido la sesión a la que asistiréis cuando registrasteis al evento, os cuento las distintas temáticas y quiénes serán los expertos que nos van a acompañar en cada una de ellas por si alguien todavía no hubiera tomado la decisión, no hubiera seleccionado ninguna. Así que empiezo con la sesión sobre el Hub de Innovación de Turismo, una apuesta global de Mastercard con epicentro aquí, en Madrid, pero con el objetivo de servir como un ecosistema global para la transformación del sector turismo. Kim Martínez, director de este Hub, y Marisol Soleil, directora de nuevos productos en Mastercard Centroamérica, presentarán las principales líneas de actuación del Hub y presentarán el último proyecto en co-creación con el Banco de Costa Rica para conectar con los turistas que visitan el país. ¿Y dónde será esta sesión? Abajo. En otra de las sesiones estarán Stephen Ryan, COO de Safertrace, junto a Javier Pastor, CSO de Bit2Me, moderados por Juan Pablo Vivas, vicepresidente senior y líder de la cuenta global de Sprint by City en Mastercard. Discutirán sobre los riesgos y las oportunidades en relación con las criptomonedas, regulación, presente y futuro de las criptomonedas, estudios, casos de otros mercados, etc. ¿Dónde será esa sesión? Aquí. De manera que las personas que vayan a la sesión de criptomonedas, ahora cuando acabemos, no se mueven. Y llegamos así a la tercera, pero no menos importante, Michelle Hughes, responsable del programa de aceleración de startups, StartPath y Engage de Mastercard, pondrá el foco en las sinergias y las posibilidades de colaboración entre las grandes corporaciones y startups y todas las posibilidades que ofrece la innovación acompañada de 3 startups que darán mucho que hablar, como Subayo, Dodo y Osper. Y esta sesión será arriba. La elección es toda vuestra, pero antes de avanzar quisiera recordar algo muy importante en los tiempos que corren. Para la realización y el desarrollo de este evento se han tomado todas las medidas necesarias para corregir, mitigar o mejorar los aspectos que este evento podría tener sobre el medio ambiente. En el servicio de restauración predominan los alimentos y bebidas de proximidad, saludables y elaborados con materias primas frescas. Todo el menaje empleado en el evento es reutilizable y los vasos de un solo uso son de cartón biodegradable. Todos los elementos decorativos han sido creados con materiales reciclados, todos, evitando el PVC y con pinturas de agua. Pinturas al agua. Todo se destruirá de manera ecológica y los residuos generados se llevarán a las plantas de reciclaje correspondientes. Todas las luces, pantallas y demás dispositivos de iluminación son LED o de bajo consumo. Hemos minimizado además la impresión de cartelería. Ha sido sustituida por pantallas LED o de bajo consumo de energía. Las impresiones de acreditaciones se han realizado con tinta ecológica y cartón reciclado por respeto a la igualdad de género. Y a este respecto, el personal de producción y logística del evento, el 50% son hombres y el 50% mujeres. Y tras el evento realizaremos una auditoría de eficiencia energética para evaluar, optimizar y monitorizar el consumo de energía, así como equilibrar el impacto y reducir la huella de carbono del evento, al tiempo que también se planificarán las medidas a poner en práctica para aumentar el impacto positivo de tipo socioeconómico. Importante objetivo de nuestro evento. Pero antes de avanzar, no quiero olvidarme de recordar a todos los asistentes que, por favor, devuelvan, hay que devolverlos, los dispositivos de traducción. Yo me despido aquí. Ha sido un placer acompañaros en esta jornada. Ahora ya sí que me despido. En esta nueva edición del Mastercard Innovation Forum Spain 2022, un abrazo a todos y hasta la próxima.
Por favor, les rogamos que acudan a la sala correspondiente a su breakout session. Gracias.
Please go to the room where your breakout session will be held. Thank you.